I can't do this. Clara Whitman's hand trembled as she set down her champagne glass, the golden liquid catching the light of 1,000 holiday decorations. Across the crowded ballroom, Noah Brooks stood perfectly still, his dark eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. He was her employee, a single father, a man still mourning his late wife. And in that crystallized moment, surrounded by oblivious colleagues celebrating another profitable year, Clara realized she had crossed a line she never intended to approach. She had fallen completely, irrevocably in love with the one person she absolutely could not have. What happens when professional boundaries collide with undeniable connection? When a powerful executive discovers her heart doesn't respect the rules she's built her career defending? Stay with me until the very end of this story. And if you're drawn into Clara and Noah's impossible choice, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see just how far their story travels. The Meridian Tower's 42nd floor had been transformed into something Clara Whitman barely recognized. White lights draped every surface, casting a warm glow that softened the sharp edges of the conference room where she'd delivered countless quarterly reports. A jazz quartet occupied the corner near the floor-to-ceiling windows, their music weaving through conversations and laughter. The annual holiday party was in full swing, and Clara stood at the periphery, nursing a glass of champagne she hadn't actually tasted. She'd attended this event for 12 consecutive years. Each time she'd stayed exactly 90 minutes, made the required rounds, and departed with her professional armor fully intact. VP of Operations wasn't just a title. It was a responsibility that required constant vigilance, especially at gatherings where alcohol loosened tongues and hierarchy blurred. Clara, you look like you're calculating quarterly projections in your head. She turned to find Marcus Chen, the CFO, grinning at her with the easy confidence of someone 3 drinks past professional. Just enjoying the atmosphere. Liar. He raised his glass toward the crowd. You've been standing in the exact same spot for 20 minutes, watching everyone like a hawk. You're allowed to actually have fun at these things, you know. This is my version of fun. God help us all. Marcus shook his head, but his expression softened. Seriously, though, Clara, you work harder than anyone in this building. Would it kill you to let your guard down for one night? Before she could formulate a response that was both honest and diplomatic, Marcus's attention shifted to someone approaching from behind her. Brooks, good to see you actually made it. Clara was just telling me how much fun she's having. Clara turned, and her carefully constructed composure faltered. Noah Brooks stood a respectful distance away, hands tucked into the pockets of his charcoal suit. He wasn't classically handsome. His features were too angular, too lived in for that. But there was something in the way he carried himself, a quiet steadiness that made people lean in when he spoke. His dark hair showed traces of silver at the temples, and his eyes held a depth that suggested he'd seen more than most people his age. Mr. Chen, Ms. Whitman. Noah's voice was low and even, the kind that didn't need volume to command attention. I wasn't planning to stay long, just wanted to show my face. Nonsense, Marcus clapped him on the shoulder with the enthusiasm of someone determined to spread holiday cheer. The night's young, and you never come to these things. Stay, have a drink, pretend to enjoy corporate small talk like the rest of us. Noah's mouth quirked in what might have been amusement. I'm not sure I'm qualified for that level of pretending. Clara found herself speaking before she'd consciously decided to. How is Mila? The question hung in the air for a moment. Noah's expression shifted, not closed exactly, but careful. She's good. Excited about the school winter concert next week. 3rd grade, right? 2nd, actually, but she's convinced she's going to be in high school by spring. There was warmth in his voice now, the kind that only appeared when he talked about his daughter. She's with my neighbor tonight, Mrs. Chen, no relation, who spoils her absolutely rotten and pretends not to. Marcus laughed. Smart man, having backup childcare. My wife and I are still trying to figure out how to leave the house without our 2 destroying everything we own. How old are yours? Noah asked. 6 and 4, also known as chaos incarnate. As Marcus launched into a story about his youngest son's recent experiment with permanent markers and white walls, Clara found herself studying Noah's profile. He listened with genuine attention, asking follow-up questions, laughing at the appropriate moments. But there was something beneath the surface, a guardedness that never quite disappeared, even when he smiled. She'd first noticed Noah 6 months ago, not because he'd done anything to draw attention, but because he'd been so conspicuously absent from it. While other members of her operations team jockeyed for visibility and credit, Noah simply did his work with a competence that spoke for itself. He joined Meridian as a project coordinator after what she'd learned was a difficult period following his wife's death. HR had flagged him as someone to watch, not because of performance concerns, but because of what he represented: a single father navigating corporate demands while raising a young daughter alone. Clara had made it her business to understand the people who worked under her leadership. Not their personal lives exactly, but the circumstances that might affect their professional ones. Noah had been a puzzle she'd struggled to solve. He arrived exactly on time, left exactly on schedule, never attended optional social events, and maintained polite but distant relationships with everyone, including her. And that's when I realized, Marcus was saying, that being a parent means accepting you'll never have clean walls or sanity again. Worth it, though, Noah said quietly. Every day, Marcus raised his glass. To the chaos that makes it all worthwhile. Noah lifted his water glass. Clara noted he wasn't drinking alcohol, and met the toast. His gaze flickered to her, and for a brief moment their eyes held. Something passed between them, quick as a breath. Recognition, maybe. Or curiosity. Then his attention returned to Marcus, and the moment dissolved. If you'll excuse me, Marcus said, spotting someone across the room, I need to go save Henderson from telling the same golf story for the third time tonight. Brooks, don't disappear. Clara, try to crack a smile before midnight. It's contractually required at holiday parties. He departed, leaving Clara and Noah in a bubble of relative quiet despite the dozens of people surrounding them. I should probably, Noah began. Do you want to get some air? Clara heard herself say. The balcony's usually empty. Noah hesitated, and she watched him calculate. It was a simple question, innocuous on its surface, but they both understood the subtext. She was inviting him away from the crowd, away from the safety of witnesses and small talk. It was a choice. Sure, he said finally. Lead the way. The balcony was accessed through a side door most people didn't notice, tucked behind the bar area. Clara had discovered it years ago when she'd needed to escape a particularly tedious conversation with a vendor. The space wasn't large, maybe 8 feet deep, running the length of the conference room, but it offered something the party inside didn't. Silence. The December air bit sharp and clean. Clara stepped to the railing, looking out over the city stretched below. From 42 floors up, Seattle looked like a scattered constellation, lights twinkling against the darkness of Elliott Bay. Noah joined her at the railing, maintaining a careful distance. I can see why you'd know about this spot. That obvious I'm looking for an escape? You've been standing in the same position for the last half hour, responding to people but not engaging with them. Classic executive at a mandatory social function. Clara glanced at him, surprised. You've been watching? I noticed things. He didn't sound apologetic. Part of surviving corporate environments when you don't quite fit the mold. You learn to read the room. And what does the room tell you about me? Noah considered the question, his profile illuminated by the reflected light from inside. That you're good at your job and uncomfortable with the parts that aren't actually your job. That people respect you but don't know you. That you'd rather be anywhere else, but you're here anyway because leadership means showing up even when you don't want to. Clara felt something shift in her chest. That's uncomfortably accurate. Sorry, my filter gets worse when I'm tired. Don't apologize. It's refreshing. She turned to face him fully. Can I ask you something? That's usually followed by something I don't want to answer, but sure. Why did you come tonight? You never come to these things. Noah was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low enough that she had to lean slightly closer to hear. Mila asked me what I was doing Friday night. When I said nothing, she asked why I never did anything fun. I didn't have a good answer. So you came to a corporate holiday party? That's your definition of fun? No, but it's my definition of trying. He met her eyes, and the directness of his gaze made her breath catch. She worries about me. 8 years old, and she worries about whether her dad has friends or does anything besides work and take care of her. That's not a weight she should carry. Clara understood weight. She understood the careful performance of normalcy, the constant calculation of other people's perceptions. You're a good father. I'm a present father. There's a difference. Noah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. A good father would have figured out how to balance everything without making his daughter feel like she has to take care of him. You're being too hard on yourself. Am I? He turned back to the view, his hands gripping the railing. She asked me last month if I was sad. Not sad about something specific, just sad in general. What kind of message am I sending when my 8-year-old can see through me that clearly? The message that you're human, Clara said quietly, that loss doesn't have an expiration date, that loving someone who's gone doesn't mean you've stopped living. Noah's head turned sharply. How do you know what that looks like? Clara finished. She hadn't planned to share this, hadn't intended to crack open the carefully sealed parts of herself, but standing in the cold December air, the party muted behind them, it felt like the only honest thing to do. My brother died 7 years ago. Car accident. He was 28. Clara, Don't. She held up a hand. I'm not telling you this because I want sympathy. I'm telling you because I understand what Mila sees when she looks at you. The same thing my parents saw when they looked at me for years afterward. That awareness that something fundamental has changed. That the person standing in front of them is both who they've always been and someone entirely different. Noah's expression had gone very still. How did you get past it? I'm not sure I did. Get past it, I mean. Clara wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of the cold. I just learned how to carry it differently. Mostly by throwing myself into work until people stopped asking if I was okay. That's my strategy too. I know, I recognize the signs. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of shared understanding settling between them. Clara could hear the music from inside, laughter rising and falling like waves. Out here, in the thin winter air, the world felt reduced to just the two of them, and the truth they'd accidentally stumbled into. Can I ask you something now? Noah said. Fair's fair. Why did you really invite me out here? Clara's heart kicked against her ribs. It was a simple question with a complicated answer, because I wanted to talk to someone real. Because I'm tired of surface-level conversations that mean nothing. Because when you look at me, I feel seen in a way that's both terrifying and necessary. Because you're the only person at this party who looks as uncomfortable as I feel, she said instead. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Noah's mouth curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. Misery loves company? Something like that. Well, for what it's worth, this is the most honest conversation I've had in months, so thank you for that. You're welcome. Though I'm not sure how it reflects on either of us that the high point of our social interaction is bonding over shared discomfort and loss. I'd say it makes us human. Noah checked his watch, and Clara felt an unexpected disappointment. I should probably head out, Mrs. Chen is great, but she's 74 and Mila has the energy of a small tornado. Of course. Clara stepped back from the railing, creating appropriate distance. Thank you for coming tonight, and for the conversation. Thank you for asking. Noah moved toward the door, then paused. Clara, what you said about carrying things differently, I think Mila might benefit from hearing that. From someone who isn't me. The suggestion landed with unexpected weight. What do you mean? Just that sometimes kids need to hear certain truths from people outside their immediate circle. Makes it feel more real, somehow. Less like something a parent says to make them feel better. He shrugged, suddenly looking uncertain. Forget it. That's crossing a line. I shouldn't have... No, Clara said quickly. It's not crossing a line, or if it is, it's one I'm okay with crossing. Noah studied her face, and Clara had the distinct impression he was trying to read something deeper than her words. I'll think about it. Have a good night, Ms. Whitman. Clara, she corrected, we're not in the office. Clara, he repeated, and the way he said her name, careful, considered, made something warm unfold in her chest. She watched him disappear back into the party, then stood alone on the balcony for several more minutes, trying to understand what had just happened. It had been a conversation, nothing more. Two colleagues finding common ground in shared experience, completely appropriate, entirely professional. So why did it feel like she'd just stepped off a cliff? Bam. Clara made it through another 30 minutes of mandatory socializing before claiming an early morning and calling it a night. The drive home took her through downtown Seattle, streets bright with holiday decorations that seemed at odds with her mood. She'd lived in the same Capitol Hill apartment for 6 years, a converted industrial loft with exposed brick and too much empty space for one person. It had seemed sophisticated when she'd moved in. Now it just felt like exactly what it was, a place to sleep between the hours she spent at work. She poured a glass of wine she wouldn't finish and stood at her living room window, watching the city below. Her phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. Made it home? Or still calculating those quarterly projections? Home, she typed back. And I never calculate projections. I simply absorb them through osmosis. That's definitely what makes you terrifying. Sleep well, Whitman. Clara set her phone down and returned to the window. Her mind kept circling back to the balcony, to the way Noah had spoken about his daughter with such careful love, to the moment their eyes had met and she'd felt that spark of recognition. Not attraction exactly, though there had been that too. Something deeper. The sense that he understood things about her that she'd never put into words. She thought about his question. Why did you really invite me out here? The answer she hadn't given echoed in the quiet apartment. Because I wanted to know if what I've been feeling for months is real or just loneliness wearing a convincing disguise. Because you're the first person in years who's made me want to be something other than the VP of operations. Because I'm terrified of what it means that I can't stop thinking about you. Clara finished her wine and went to bed, trying to convince herself that the conversation would fade into the background noise of corporate interactions, that she'd wake up Monday morning and everything would return to its proper place. She was wrong. Monday arrived with the kind of gray drizzle that made Seattle feel like it was wrapped in cotton. Clara had 3 back-to-back meetings starting at 8, which left her no time to dwell on the holiday party or the conversation that had occupied her thoughts all weekend. Or so she told herself. The first meeting was a project review with her operations team. 15 people crowded around the conference table, laptops open, coffee cups multiplying. Noah sat 4 seats to her left, taking notes with the same quiet focus he brought to everything. Clara forced herself to look at him no more or less than anyone else, maintaining the careful equilibrium she'd spent years perfecting. The Cascade implementation is tracking 2 weeks behind schedule, Tim Hawking was saying, frustration clear in his voice. The client keeps changing specifications, and we're not billing for the extra hours. Why not? Clara asked. Because the contract doesn't have provisions for scope creep, and legal is dragging their feet on the amendment. Clara made a note. Noah, you've dealt with this client before. What's your read? Noah looked up from his laptop, expression neutral. They're testing boundaries. This is their first major project with us, and they want to see how much flexibility we'll offer. If we don't establish clear parameters now, it'll get worse with the next phase. Agreed. Clara turned to Tim. Set up a call with the client this week. I'll join. We're going to reset expectations and get that contract amendment signed, even if I have to camp out in legal until they process it. Tim nodded, looking relieved. Thanks, Clara. The meeting continued through various project updates, budget reviews, and resource allocation discussions. Clara had always prided herself on running efficient meetings. No wasted time, no unnecessary tangents. People came prepared because they knew she'd notice if they didn't. As the team filed out afterward, Noah hung back, gathering his materials with deliberate slowness. Clara recognized the tactic, the illusion of casual timing that was anything but. When the room was empty except for the two of them, he spoke without looking at her. About Friday night. I wanted to apologize if I overstepped. Clara felt her guard rise automatically. You didn't. I suggested you talk to my daughter. That's not exactly appropriate office conversation. Noah. She waited until he looked at her. If I thought you'd overstepped, I would have said so. I don't do polite deflection. Something flickered in his expression. Relief, maybe, or surprise. Okay, good to know. Besides, the offer stands. If you think it would help Mila to talk to someone outside her immediate circle, I'm available. You're serious. I don't make offers I don't mean. Clara gathered her own materials, creating the appearance of casual conversation even as her heart rate increased. For what it's worth, I think you're doing better than you give yourself credit for. Single parenthood while maintaining a demanding career isn't for the faint of heart. Some days I'm not sure I'm doing either particularly well. Join the club. Most of us are just making educated guesses and hoping for the best. Noah smiled, and it transformed his face into something warmer, more open. That's surprisingly comforting coming from someone whose job is to have all the answers. My job is to appear like I have all the answers. There's a significant difference. I'm starting to see that. They stood in the empty conference room, the moment stretching between them. Clara could feel the pull again, that same magnetic awareness from the balcony, the sense that if she wasn't careful, she could lose herself in trying to understand this quiet, complicated man. I should get to my next meeting, she said, breaking the spell. Right, of course. Noah headed for the door, then paused. Clara, thank you for Friday and for this. It's been a long time since I've had conversations that feel real. Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving her alone with the echo of his words and the growing certainty that she was in dangerous territory. The week unfolded with its usual demands: budget reviews, client presentations, the endless stream of decisions that required her attention. But beneath the surface of professional competence, Clara found herself increasingly aware of Noah's presence in the building. They didn't interact more than usual. If anything, he seemed to maintain even more careful distance, as though he too recognized the need for boundaries. But Clara noticed things. The way he always arrived exactly 7 minutes early for meetings, how he listened more than he spoke, but when he did contribute, people paid attention. The fact that he never joined the others for lunch, instead eating at his desk while video calling with Mila about her day. On Wednesday, Clara found herself in the break room at the same time as Sarah Kim, one of the junior analysts who sat near Noah. Morning, Clara, Sarah said, juggling a coffee mug and her phone. How's your week going? Productively chaotic. Yours? Same. Though I have to say, having Noah on our team makes things easier. He caught an error in the Whitmore contract that would have cost us 6 figures. The man has an eye for detail that borders on supernatural. Clara poured her coffee, keeping her voice carefully neutral. He's a strong team member. Also possibly a saint. Did you know he's coaching his daughter's soccer team? I heard him on the phone yesterday organizing practice schedules and snack rotations. Where he finds the time, I have no idea. He's clearly dedicated. Sarah leaned against the counter, her expression turning thoughtful. You know what's weird, though? He's been here 6 months, and I don't think anyone really knows him. Like, we know the surface stuff. Single dad, keeps to himself, excellent at his job. But beyond that, it's like he's deliberately keeping everyone at arm's length. Some people are private. True, but it's more than that with him. It's like he's going through the motions of being here, but keeping his real life completely separate, which I guess makes sense given what he's been through, but still. Must be lonely. Clara thought about the conversation on the balcony, about Noah's admission that he was trying. Maybe he's just careful about who he lets in. Maybe. Sarah grabbed her coffee and headed for the door. Anyway, I should get back. Conference call in 5. Have a good day, Clara. Alone in the break room, Clara stared at her coffee and tried to ignore the growing awareness that she wanted to be someone Noah let in. Not as his boss, not even as a friend exactly, something else. Something undefined that made her pulse quicken whenever she saw his name on her meeting schedule. It was a problem. She recognized that clearly. Noah reported to her, which meant any personal relationship beyond professional courtesy crossed ethical lines she'd spent her career respecting. He was also navigating single parenthood and clearly still processing his wife's death. The last thing he needed was romantic complication with his supervisor. The smart move was to maintain distance. To treat him exactly as she treated every other team member, with respect and professional courtesy, nothing more. To let whatever this was fade into the background until it stopped feeling significant. Clara was good at smart moves. She'd built her career on them. So why did the thought of stepping back feel like losing something vital? Thursday afternoon brought an unexpected crisis. The Cascade client called an emergency meeting, threatening to pull the contract over the timeline delays. Clara found herself in her office at 5 p.m. with Tim, Noah, and Marcus strategizing damage control. They're using the delays as leverage to renegotiate pricing, Marcus said, scrolling through the contract on his tablet. Standard power play. They know we need this account. But do we? Clara leaned back in her chair, considering. Cascade represents 8% of our quarterly revenue. Significant, but not catastrophic if we lose them. What's the cost of keeping them if it means setting a precedent that clients can change scope without financial adjustment? Long-term reputation damage, Noah said quietly. Every client we have talks to other potential clients. If word gets out that we'll eat costs to keep people happy, we'll spend the next 2 years fighting that perception. Tim nodded. He's right. We already see it with some of the smaller accounts. They push boundaries because they've heard we're flexible. Clara looked at Noah. What would you do? He met her eyes without hesitation. Call their bluff. Tell them we value the partnership but won't proceed without appropriate contract terms. Most clients respect clear boundaries more than accommodation. The ones who don't aren't worth keeping. That's a risk. Everything's a risk. The question is whether you're risking short-term revenue or long-term viability. Marcus whistled low. Damn, Brooks. Remind me not to play poker with you. Clara smiled despite the tension. All right. We hold the line. Tim, set up a call for tomorrow morning. I'll handle the conversation. Marcus, get legal to expedite that contract amendment. I want it ready to send the moment they agree to terms. And if they don't agree? Tim asked. Then we lose a client we probably shouldn't have kept anyway. Clara stood, signaling the meeting's end. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you tomorrow. Tim and Marcus departed, but Noah lingered again, and Clara felt that now familiar awareness settle over her. That was a gutsy call, he said. It was the right call. You made a solid argument. I've been in this industry long enough to see what happens when companies prioritize short-term revenue over long-term strategy. It never ends well. Clara moved to the window, looking out over the city as twilight settled in. Can I ask you something? Sure. Before Meridian, you worked in defense contracting, right? Project management for military systems? Noah's posture shifted almost imperceptibly. That's right. So you went from managing multi-million-dollar defense projects to coordinating corporate implementations. That's a significant step down in terms of scope and responsibility. It is. Clara turned to face him. Why? Because defense contracting requires clearance levels, travel schedules, and time commitments that aren't compatible with single parenthood. I could keep my career trajectory or be present for my daughter, not both. That must have been a difficult choice. It wasn't a choice. It was the only option that made sense. Noah's voice was steady, but Clara heard the weight beneath it. My wife died, and Mila lost her mother. I wasn't going to make her lose her father, too, even if he was technically alive. So you sacrificed your career. I adjusted my priorities. There's a difference. Clara studied his face, seeing the careful control he maintained. Do you regret it? Every single day. The admission came without hesitation. I regret that the situation required it. I regret that I couldn't figure out how to have both. I regret that Mila will grow up understanding her father gave up something significant for her sake, which is a burden no child should carry. He paused. But I don't regret choosing her. That was never in question. Something in Clara's chest cracked open. She understood sacrifice in the abstract. Everyone did. But this was different. This was watching someone live with the daily weight of a choice that had cost them something fundamental, and do it anyway because the alternative was unthinkable. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I think you made the right call. You're in the minority. Most people in this industry would say I torpedoed my career for the wrong reasons. Then most people in this industry have their priorities backward. Noah smiled, and it was the first unguarded expression she'd seen from him. You're an interesting person, Clara Whitman. Is that a compliment? Absolutely. They stood in the growing darkness of her office, the city lights beginning to twinkle below. Clara knew she should say goodnight, maintain the professional distance that was already growing dangerously thin. Instead, she found herself speaking before she could reconsider. Would you want to get coffee sometime? Outside of work. Just to talk. The words hung in the air between them. Noah's expression went carefully neutral, and Clara watched him process the invitation, weighing implications and boundaries. Clara, I know what you're going to say. That I'm your boss, that it crosses lines, that it's complicated.
You're right on all counts, but I'm asking anyway because I enjoy talking to you, and I think you enjoy talking to me, and we're both adults who can navigate complexity. Are we? Noah asked quietly. Navigate complexity, I mean? I'd like to think so. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. Coffee sounds good, but not because you're my boss or despite it. Because you're right, I do enjoy talking to you. And that's both the best and worst reason to say yes. Clara felt her heart rate spike. Is that a yes? That's a yes with a significant asterisk. I can work with asterisks. Saturday afternoon, there's a coffee shop in Fremont that makes excellent espresso and has a playground next door. I'll need to bring Mila. The inclusion of his daughter was both a boundary and an invitation. Clara understood what he was saying. This isn't a date. This is you being part of my actual life, which means accepting that I come as a package deal. Saturday works, Clara said. Text me the address? Noah pulled out his phone, and they exchanged numbers with the strange formality of two people who both understood they were crossing a line neither could fully articulate. As his phone buzzed with her contact information, he looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. I should go pick up Mila. Mrs. Chen is probably teaching her questionable card games. Questionable how? Last time it was poker. The time before that, she learned to count cards. I'm raising a tiny con artist. Clara laughed, and the sound surprised her. She sounds wonderful. She is, terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. Noah moved toward the door, then paused. Clara, I don't know what this is, but I'm glad it's happening. Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving her alone in her office with the city spread below and the growing certainty that she'd just done something either incredibly stupid or incredibly brave. Possibly both. Friday's call with Cascade went exactly as Noah had predicted. They blustered, threatened, and ultimately accepted the contract amendment when Clara held firm. By noon, Marcus was buying celebratory drinks at the bar across the street, crowing about Clara's negotiation skills. That, he said, raising his glass, is why you make the big decisions. Steel spine and strategic brilliance. I just listened to good advice, Clara said, glancing at Noah across the table. Brooks does give solid counsel, Tim agreed, though I nearly had a heart attack when you told them we'd walk away if they didn't agree to terms. That's called confidence, Marcus said, or possibly insanity. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. They spent an hour rehashing the call, analyzing client psychology, and making plans for the project's next phase. Noah contributed occasionally, but mostly listened, seeming content to observe rather than participate. Clara found herself hyper-aware of his presence, the way he held his water glass, the occasional smile when Marcus made a particularly outrageous comment, the fact that he checked his phone exactly twice, presumably for messages from Mila. When the group finally dispersed, Clara walked back to the office alone, her mind already on Saturday. She'd agreed to coffee with Noah and his daughter, which was either the start of something or a disaster waiting to unfold. There was no middle ground. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Coffee shop is called Slate. Mila is already planning conversation topics, which means you'll be interrogated extensively. Fair warning, Clara smiled at her screen. I'll prepare accordingly, looking forward to it. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, me too, which probably means I'm an idiot, but at least I'm an honest one. She typed back, honesty is underrated, see you Saturday. The dots appeared once more, then vanished without a response. Clara pocketed her phone and returned to her office, where the afternoon stretched ahead with meetings and decisions and all the familiar demands of her position. But underneath it all, humming through her thoughts like a frequency she couldn't quite tune out, was the awareness that tomorrow would bring something different. A chance to see Noah in his actual life, rather than his professional one. To meet the daughter, who was clearly his entire world. To discover whether this connection she felt was real or just loneliness wearing a convincing disguise. By the time she left the office that evening, rain was falling in steady sheets, turning Seattle's streets into rivers of reflected light. Clara drove home through the storm, parked in her building's garage, and rode the elevator to her loft, feeling something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope,
It was terrifying and exhilarating and completely inappropriate given every professional boundary she'd ever maintained. But as she stood in her empty apartment, looking out at the rain-soaked city, Clara acknowledged the truth she'd been avoiding all week. Whatever was happening between her and Noah Brooks had already moved past the point of professional courtesy, past the point of friendly conversation, past the point where she could pretend it didn't matter. She was falling for him, slowly, carefully, and against every instinct that told her this was dangerous territory. And tomorrow, she'd take the next step forward, consequences be damned. Because sometimes, Clara thought as she poured a glass of wine and settled on her couch, the right choice is the one that scares you most, the one that requires stepping off solid ground into something undefined and uncertain, the one that asks you to trust that catching feelings for someone is worth the risk of everything falling apart. She'd spent years building walls around herself, professional, emotional, psychological, walls that kept her safe and separate and endlessly, exhaustingly alone. Maybe it was time to let someone in, even if that someone was exactly the wrong person at exactly the wrong time, especially then. Saturday morning arrived with rare December sunshine breaking through Seattle's typical cloud cover. Clara woke earlier than necessary, her mind already racing through the afternoon ahead. She'd chosen and discarded 3 different outfits before settling on dark jeans and a cream sweater, casual enough to seem effortless, polished enough to feel like herself. The careful deliberation annoyed her. She was meeting a colleague for coffee, not attending a state dinner. The fact that her hands trembled slightly while applying mascara only reinforced how far she'd already strayed from professional territory. The coffee shop Noah had suggested sat in Fremont's quirky neighborhood, wedged between a vintage clothing store and a bookshop with a hand-painted sign. Clara arrived 10 minutes early, a habit she couldn't break even in personal contexts, and claimed a table near the window that offered a clear view of the playground next door. The space had exposed brick walls covered in local artwork, mismatched furniture that somehow worked together, and the rich smell of fresh ground coffee that made her shoulders relax despite her nerves. She was reading the menu when the door opened and Noah walked in, holding hands with a small girl whose dark curls bounced with each step. Mila Brooks had her father's serious eyes, but a brightness to her expression that suggested she hadn't yet learned to guard herself the way he had. She wore purple leggings, light-up sneakers, and a jacket covered in patches of various cartoon characters. "Clara!" Noah's voice carried across the nearly empty shop. "We're not late, are we?" "Right on time." Clara stood, suddenly uncertain of the appropriate greeting. Handshake seemed absurd. Hug felt presumptuous. She settled for a smile directed at Mila. "You must be Mila. Your dad's told me about you." Mila studied her with the unnerving directness of children who haven't learned social politeness. "He said you're his boss and you're really smart and also kind of scary, but in a good way." Mila, Noah's face flushed slightly. "What? That's what you said?" Mila turned back to Clara. "Are you scary?" Clara laughed, the tension in her chest easing. "I try not to be, but sometimes being in charge means making decisions people don't always like. Does that count as scary?" "Maybe. Or maybe it just means you're good at your job." Mila tilted her head. "Do you like coffee? I think coffee smells good but tastes like dirt." "That's a surprisingly accurate description. What do you like?" "Hot chocolate, with extra marshmallows. Dad says I can only have it sometimes because too much sugar makes me vibrate at frequencies unsuitable for indoor spaces." She delivered the last part in a solemn imitation of Noah's voice that made Clara laugh again. Those sound like his exact words. Like his. They are. He uses big words when he's trying to say no without actually saying no. Mila tugged on Noah's hand. "Can I have hot chocolate today?" Noah looked at Clara with an expression of amused resignation. "See what I'm dealing with? She's 8 going on 35. "Hot chocolate sounds perfect," Clara said. "I'll get it. What do you want, Noah?" "Americano black, but you don't have to." "I invited you. I'm buying." Clara headed to the counter before he could argue, acutely aware of Mila's voice chattering behind her, something about the playground having new swings. When she returned with their drinks, Noah and Mila had settled at the table, coats draped over chairs. Mila had produced a small notebook and was drawing something with intense concentration. "What are you working on?" Clara set the hot chocolate in front of her, noting how Mila's eyes lit up at the mountain of marshmallows. A map of all the places I want to visit. See? She turned the notebook so Clara could see. The page was covered in crude drawings labeled with careful printing. Paris with a tower, Egypt with pyramids, Antarctica with penguins, space with stars and a rocket ship. That's ambitious. Space might be tricky. Not if I become an astronaut or invent teleportation. Dad says if I'm going to dream, I should dream big. Mila took a sip of her hot chocolate, leaving a marshmallow mustache on her upper lip. Where have you been? Lots of places for work. London, Tokyo, Singapore, Sydney. Mila's eyes widened. That's like different continents. Did you see kangaroos in Sydney? I did, actually, at a wildlife sanctuary outside the city. Were they nice? Very nice, though they mostly ignored me in favor of eating. That's how I am with pizza. Mila returned to her drawing, adding what appeared to be Australia with several kangaroos. Dad's only been to boring places, military bases and stuff. That doesn't count as real travel. Noah raised an eyebrow. Excuse me. Those military bases were in very interesting locations. Iraq isn't a vacation destination, Dad. Fair point. He met Clara's eyes over his daughter's head, and she saw humor mixed with something deeper. Pride, maybe. Or the complicated love parents have for children who are simultaneously wonderful and exhausting. They talked for a while about travel, about Mila's school where she was apparently excelling in math and struggling with reading comprehension, about the upcoming winter concert where she'd be playing recorder in what Noah described as an assault on musical sensibility, but very cute. You should come, Mila announced suddenly, looking at Clara with such hopeful expectation that refusing felt impossible. Mila, Noah started. What? It's next Friday at 7. We're playing songs and there's cookies after. Clara probably likes cookies. Mila turned to her. Do you like cookies? I do like cookies, Clara admitted, but your dad might not want his boss at his daughter's school concert. Why not? You're friends now, right? Mila looked between them with a child's simple logic. Friends come to important stuff. Noah's expression had gone carefully neutral, and Clara recognized the expression from their office interactions. He was calculating, weighing appropriate responses against Mila's expectations. I'd love to come, Clara said, making the decision for both of them. If it's okay with your dad. Of course it's okay, Noah said after a brief pause. Fair warning, though, the recorder section sounds like someone torturing a flock of geese. I'm prepared for that level of musical chaos. Mila beamed. Perfect. Now I have 2 people coming instead of just Dad. That's way better. What about Mrs. Chen? Noah asked. He said recorders give her headaches, and she's too old for that kind of suffering. Mila finished her hot chocolate and hopped down from her chair. Can I go to the playground now? Sure. Stay where I can see you. I know. Don't talk to strangers, don't eat random food, and don't try to adopt stray animals. She rattled off the rules with the weariness of someone who'd heard them 1,000 times. I'll be on the swings. They watched her race out the door and across to the playground, her light-up shoes flashing with each step. Noah's entire posture changed the moment she was out of earshot, shoulders relaxing, guard dropping slightly. I apologize for the ambush invitation, he said. She's been practicing subtlety, but clearly needs more work. Don't apologize. I meant it. I'd like to come. You don't have to. I know she put you on the spot. Noah. Clara waited until he looked at her. I wouldn't have said yes if I didn't want to. I don't do polite lies, remember? Right, the direct approach. He smiled, but there was uncertainty beneath it. This is weird, isn't it? Having coffee like normal people when Monday morning I'll be in your office reporting on project timelines. It's definitely outside standard professional boundaries. And yet here we are. Here we are, Clara agreed. Through the window, she could see Mila pumping her legs on the swing, head tilted back toward the sky. She's wonderful, you know. She is. Smart, funny, completely lacking in fear about talking to adults. Sometimes I think she got the best parts of both her parents. Noah's voice roughened slightly on the last word. Sarah was like that. Never met a stranger, could talk to anyone about anything. It was the first time he'd mentioned his late wife by name. Clara held very still, sensing she was being trusted with something significant. How long has it been? She asked quietly. 3 years in January, brain aneurysm.
She was making Mila breakfast, complained about a headache, and collapsed, gone before the ambulance arrived.
He spoke with the flat affect of someone who'd told the story too many times, words worn smooth by repetition. Mila found her, 5 years old, trying to wake her mom up while calling 911 because she remembered the number from a safety lesson at school. God, Noah. Yeah. He watched his daughter through the window, jaw tight. That's why I changed jobs. Why I keep everything so carefully structured. Why Mrs. Chen is on speed dial and I have backup plans for my backup plans. Because Mila already experienced something no child should survive, and I'll be damned if I let her down again. You didn't let her down the first time. You can't control aneurysms. Logic and guilt don't always align. Noah turned back to Clara, and the raw honesty in his expression made her chest ache. You know what the worst part is? Mila barely remembers her. She was so young, and memories fade. I have to remind myself that's probably a mercy. But it also means she's growing up with this idealized image of her mother based on photos and stories rather than actual memory. How do you parent around that? Clara thought about her brother, about the way her parents had struggled with his absence. You do exactly what you're doing. You show up, you're present, you make sure she knows she's loved. The rest is out of your control. That's terrifying. Welcome to being human. We're all terrified and pretending otherwise. Noah laughed, and the sound carried genuine warmth. I'm starting to understand why people find you scary in a good way. You cut through all the bullshit straight to truth. Years of practice. Clara traced the rim of her coffee cup. Can I tell you something? Please? I haven't done this in a very long time. Sat with someone and just talked about real things. Everything in my life is so carefully compartmentalized. Work. Clara, sister Clara, daughter Clara, for my parents. None of them overlap, and none of them are particularly authentic. But sitting here with you and Mila, I feel like I can just be myself. It's unsettling and wonderful in equal measure. I know exactly what you mean. Noah leaned forward slightly. I've spent 3 years being dad first and everything else a distant second, which is right and necessary, but it also means I've forgotten how to be anything else, how to have conversations that aren't about school schedules or whether dinosaurs are cooler than rockets. For the record, dinosaurs are definitely cooler. Spoken like someone who doesn't understand the engineering marvel of spaceflight. Spoken like someone who doesn't appreciate that dinosaurs ruled the Earth for millions of years. Rockets have been around for maybe a century. Are we seriously having this argument? We are. And I'm winning. Noah grinned, and Clara felt something warm unfold in her chest. This was dangerous territory, bantering like old friends, sharing personal history, inviting each other into the messy reality of actual lives. But it also felt inevitable, as though they'd been moving toward this moment since that first conversation on the balcony. Through the window, Mila had moved to the monkey bars, hanging upside down with her curls brushing the mulch below. A few other children had joined the playground, and she was clearly the ringleader of some complicated game involving running and yelling. She's fearless, Clara observed. She got that from Sarah, too. I'm the cautious one. Sarah would have jumped off those monkey bars just to see if she could stick the landing. Noah's expression softened with memory. She was a nurse, trauma unit, saw terrible things every day and came home laughing about something ridiculous a patient said or excited about saving someone's life. I never understood how she maintained that level of optimism. Maybe she learned to find light in dark places. It's a survival skill. Maybe. Noah fell quiet for a moment. Can I ask you something potentially inappropriate? That seems to be our pattern. Why aren't you in a relationship? You're intelligent, successful, surprisingly easy to talk to once people get past the executive armor. Statistically, someone should have locked that down years ago. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. Wow, direct question. You don't do polite deflection, remember? Neither do I. Fair point. Clara considered her answer, trying to articulate something she'd never quite put into words. I think after my brother died, I convinced myself that achieving something meaningful was more important than being happy. That if I could just work hard enough, be successful enough, maybe his death would have some kind of purpose. Like I was living for both of us. She paused. Which sounds insane when I say it out loud. It doesn't sound insane. It sounds like survivor's guilt wearing a corporate suit. That's depressingly accurate. Clara watched Mila, now racing another child across the playground. I dated, obviously, but nothing stuck. Work was always easier, cleaner, less complicated. I could control outcomes, measure success, know exactly where I stood. Relationships were none of those things. Until recently, Clara met his eyes. Until recently. The words hung between them, loaded with meaning neither quite acknowledged. Noah held her gaze for a long moment, and Clara could see him processing, calculating, weighing risks against possibilities. "This is complicated," he said finally. "Extremely. You're my boss. Technically, your boss's boss. That doesn't make it less complicated." "No, it doesn't." Clara took a breath. "But I'm also just Clara. And you're just Noah. And we're two people who enjoy talking to each other and seem to understand things about each other that most people don't. And that's enough reason to pursue this despite all the very valid complications?" "I don't know," Clara admitted, "but I'd like to find out." Noah was quiet, his expression unreadable. Through the window, Mila was waving frantically, signaling for him to watch something. He waved back, then turned to Clara with something like resignation in his eyes. "My therapist would probably say this is a terrible idea." "You have a therapist?" "Court mandated after Sarah died, to make sure I was stable enough to parent alone. Turns out talking to someone about catastrophic loss is actually helpful." He smiled wryly. "Who knew?" "Revolutionary concept." "Right?" Noah's expression turned serious. "Clara, I need you to understand something. If we do this, whatever this is, Mila comes first. Always. Not sometimes. Not when convenient. Always. I wouldn't expect anything else. And I'm not looking for someone to replace Sarah. I'm not sure I'll ever stop loving her or missing her or wishing she was here to see our daughter grow up. That's baggage I carry, and it's not going away. I'm not asking you to put down your baggage. I'm just asking for a chance to see if maybe we could carry some of it together." Noah's eyes widened slightly, and Clara realized she'd surprised him. That's actually the most understanding thing anyone said to me in 3 years." "Then you've been talking to the wrong people." Before he could respond, the door burst open and Mila rushed in, cheeks flushed from exertion. "Dad, there's a dog outside, and the owner said I could pet it if you said it was okay. And it's a golden retriever, which are basically the best dogs ever, and can I please, please, please pet it?" Noah laughed. "Breathe, kiddo. Where's the dog?" "Right outside." Mila grabbed his hand, tugging. "Come on!" They followed her outside, where indeed a golden retriever sat patiently next to its owner, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a knowing smile. "Sorry about the enthusiasm," Noah said. "She's a dog person." "No apology needed. Sonny here loves attention." The woman gestured toward her dog. "Go ahead, sweetheart." Mila dropped to her knees, and the retriever immediately leaned into her, tail wagging with such force his entire back end moved. She buried her face in his fur, giggling when he licked her cheek. "Can we get a dog?" Mila asked without looking up. "Please, I'd take care of it and walk it and feed it and everything." "We've had this conversation," Noah said gently. "Dogs are a lot of responsibility, and with my work schedule, but you wouldn't have to do everything. I'm responsible. Mrs. Chen said so." Clara watched the negotiation unfold with amusement. It was clear this wasn't the first time they'd covered this ground, and equally clear that Noah was fighting a losing battle against his daughter's determination. "Mila, we can't right now. Maybe when you're older." "That's what you always say." Mila's voice carried the universal frustration of children everywhere facing parental logic. But she didn't push further, just continued petting Sonny with single-minded focus. After a few more minutes, they said goodbye to the dog and his owner. Mila was quieter on the walk back to the parking lot, processing disappointment with the resilience of someone who'd learned early that not everything worked out the way you wanted. "I should get her home," Noah said when they reached Clara's car. Homework and dinner and the eternal battle over screen time. "Of course." Clara knelt down so she was eye level with Mila. "Thank you for showing me your map today. I hope you get to visit all those places." "Oh, will you tell me about the kangaroos more sometime?" Mila asked. "And the other places you've been?" "Absolutely. Maybe at the concert next Friday?" Mila's face brightened. "Really? You're really coming?" "Really. I wouldn't miss it. Mila threw her arms around Clara's neck in an impulsive hug that caught her completely off guard. For a moment, Clara froze, uncertain how to respond. Then instinct took over and she hugged back, feeling the solid warmth of this small person who'd somehow decided she was worth trusting. Okay, Munchkin, let Clara breathe. Noah gently extracted his daughter, but his eyes met Clara's over Mila's head with an expression she couldn't quite name. Gratitude, maybe. Or something more complicated. They said their goodbyes, and Clara watched them walk to Noah's practical gray sedan, Mila chattering the entire way. Before getting in, Noah turned back and raised his hand in a small wave. Clara returned it, then climbed into her own car and sat for a long moment, processing everything that had just happened. She'd gone to coffee with a colleague and his daughter. She'd been interrogated about travel, invited to a school concert, and hugged by an 8-year-old with marshmallow breath. She'd learned about Noah's late wife, his therapy, his careful structure built around preventing more loss. And she'd admitted out loud that she wanted to pursue whatever this was between them, despite every complication. Clara's phone buzzed with a text from Noah. Thank you for today. Mila hasn't stopped talking about you since we got in the car. Fair warning, you're now officially on her list of favorite people. Clara typed back. I'm honored to make the list. Also, she's right about the dog. You should get one. You're not helping, not trying to help, trying to be honest. That's what I'm afraid of. Clara smiled at her phone, then started her car and drove home through the Saturday afternoon traffic. The city looked different somehow, brighter, more alive, full of possibility. She recognized the feeling as dangerous, the kind of hope that could shatter if she wasn't careful. But sitting alone in her apartment later, making dinner she'd eat while reading work emails, Clara decided she didn't want to be careful. She wanted to see where this went, with Noah, with Mila, with the life she could feel taking shape at the edges of her carefully controlled existence. The following week unfolded with a strange double reality. At work, Clara and Noah maintained their professional distance, interacting only when necessary and always with appropriate corporate polish. But underneath the surface, there was a current of awareness that changed everything. When he contributed in meetings, she found herself paying extra attention not just to his ideas, but to the way he thought. When they passed in hallways, the brief nods of acknowledgement carried weight that hadn't existed before. On Wednesday, Clara found an envelope on her desk with her name written in careful child's handwriting. Inside was a drawing of 3 stick figures labeled Dad, Clara, and me, standing in front of something that might have been either a dog or a very large rat. At the bottom, Mila had written, "Thank you for the hot chocolate." Clara pinned it to her office bulletin board, usually reserved for project timelines and strategic initiatives. Sarah from the team noticed it during their afternoon meeting. "Is that from someone's kid?" she asked, curious. "A friend's daughter," Clara said, keeping her voice neutral. "She's very artistic." "That's sweet. I didn't know you had friends with kids." "I'm full of surprises." Sarah laughed and returned to discussing budget allocations, but Clara caught herself glancing at the drawing throughout the day. Something about its simple earnestness made her smile despite the complex reality it represented. Thursday brought unexpected complications. Marcus called Clara into his office wearing his serious face, the one that meant actual problems rather than his usual dramatic exaggerations. "We need to talk about Noah Brooks," he said without preamble. Clara's stomach dropped. "What about him?" "He's being recruited, heavily. I just got a call from a friend at Dynamics Corp. They're offering him a senior project management position, significant pay increase, leadership responsibilities, the works." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "I don't want to lose him. The man's good at his job, and we've already invested in getting him up to speed on our systems." "Have they made an official offer?" "Not yet, but it's coming. My friend was doing due diligence. Wanted to know if there were any issues that might make Brooks a bad fit." Marcus studied her face. "You want to tell me why you look like I just kicked your dog?" "I don't have a dog." "Clara." She took a breath, weighing how much to share. "I'd also hate to lose him. He's a strong team member." "That's your professional answer. What's your actual answer?" "That's complicated." Marcus's eyebrows rose. Oh, wait, are you and Brooks?" "We're not anything." Clara cut him off before he could finish the thought. "We've had coffee, that's it." "Coffee. Coffee!" Clara, you realize he reports to you, right? Technically to Tim, but you're still in the chain of command. I'm aware of the reporting structure, Marcus. Thank you for the reminder. I'm not judging. I'm just pointing out that if this goes anywhere, HR is going to have opinions. Strong ones. He paused. Also, are you sure this is a good idea? He's got a kid. He's still dealing with losing his wife. That's a lot of complexity. Everything interesting is complex.
That's very philosophical and also completely avoids my question. Clara met his eyes. I don't know if it's a good idea, but I'd like the chance to find out. And if he gets offered a better position elsewhere, I'm not going to stand in his way just because it's inconvenient for me personally. Marcus was quiet for a moment. You're serious about him. I'm serious about being honest about what this is and isn't. Clara stood, signaling the end of the conversation. If Dynamics makes an offer, we counter. Not because of anything personal, but because Brooks is valuable and we should retain valuable people. And if he takes their offer anyway, then we wish him well and mean it. She returned to her office and closed the door, her mind racing. The possibility of Noah leaving hadn't occurred to her, which was foolish in retrospect. Of course he'd be recruited. Of course someone would recognize his skills and offer him something closer to what he'd walked away from.
The question was whether he'd take it and what that would mean for the fragile connection they'd been building. Her phone buzzed. Still on for tomorrow night? Mila's been practicing her recorder solo with religious devotion. I think the neighbors are filing noise complaints. Clara stared at the message, thinking about Dynamics Corp and reporting structures and all the ways this could become more complicated. Then she typed back, "Wouldn't miss it. How early should I arrive to get a good seat? Doors open at 6:30. But fair warning, good seats are relative when you're sitting through an hour of 8-year-olds murdering classical music. I'll prepare accordingly." Friday evening found Clara sitting in a too-small chair designed for elementary school parents, surrounded by other adults with expressions ranging from proud to resigned. The multi-purpose room smelled like disinfectant and childhood, and the stage at the front had been decorated with construction paper snowflakes and a banner reading Winter Concert 2024. Noah slid into the seat beside her 5 minutes before the show started, looking harried. "Sorry, last-minute costume crisis involving a lost hat and a lot of tears. Everything okay now?" Define okay. She's wearing a replacement hat and has stopped crying, but I'm officially the worst father ever for not checking that we had all costume pieces before tonight. He ran a hand through his hair. Parenting is just a series of minor disasters held together by hope and caffeine. You're doing better than you think. That's generous. Noah glanced around the crowded room. I can't believe you actually came. I said I would. People say a lot of things. I'm not people. He looked at her then, really looked, and Clara felt that familiar pull of connection. No, he said quietly. You're definitely not. The lights dimmed before she could respond, and the principal took the stage to welcome everyone. Then came the parade of performances, kindergartners singing about snowmen with more enthusiasm than accuracy, fourth graders doing a choreographed dance that was supposed to be synchronized but wasn't, and finally, the second grade recorder ensemble. Mila stood in the front row, her face serious with concentration. When the music started, Clara understood Noah's warning. The sound that emerged was indeed reminiscent of distressed waterfowl, but there was also something endearing about these small humans taking their performance so seriously. Mila's tongue stuck out slightly as she played, her fingers moving across the holes with careful precision. She's doing great, Clara whispered. She's hitting maybe 60% of the right notes, but I appreciate the diplomatic assessment. Noah's voice carried warmth and pride in equal measure. The performance ended to enthusiastic applause. As promised, cookies and punch appeared, and children scattered throughout the room to find their parents. Mila spotted them immediately and raced over, still wearing her construction paper hat. Did you see me? Did you see? She bounced on her toes. I only messed up twice, and one time wasn't even my fault because Danny started playing the wrong part. You were wonderful, Clara said honestly. Very professional. Really, Dad always says I'm good, but parents have to say that. Mila turned to Noah. Right? Legally required, Noah confirmed, but in this case, I actually mean it. Can we get cookies now? Go ahead, bring me back a chocolate chip if there are any left. Mila darted off toward the refreshment table with single-minded purpose. Noah watched her go, his expression soft with affection. "She's going to crash hard tonight," he said. Sugar and adrenaline followed by complete exhaustion. "Worth it, though?"
"Always worth it." He turned to Clara. "Thank you for coming. It means more than you probably realize."
"I'm glad I came."
Clara hesitated, then decided to just say it. "Marcus told me you're being recruited by Dynamics Corp." Noah's expression shuddered slightly.
"Word travels fast."
"It's a smaller industry than people think. Are you considering it?" "I don't know yet. They haven't made an official offer." He shoved his hands in his pockets. "It would be more money, more responsibility, closer to what I used to do. But it would also mean longer hours, more travel, less time with Mila." "The same trade-offs that made you leave defense contracting." "Exactly." Noah was quiet for a moment. "Can I be honest with you?" "Always." "Part of me wants to say yes, not for the money or the title, but because it would prove I didn't completely derail my career, that I'm still capable of handling complex projects and leading teams." He paused.
"But the bigger part of me knows it's not worth it if it means sacrificing time with my daughter. Or..." He stopped himself. "Or what? Or whatever this is that's happening between us. Because I'm realistic enough to know that adding more job stress into an already complicated situation isn't going to end well." Clara's heart kicked against her ribs. "So you're turning down opportunities because of me?" "Not just because of you, because of everything. Mila, work-life balance, not repeating past mistakes." He met her eyes. "But yeah, you're definitely a factor in the equation." Before Clara could respond, Mila returned with 3 cookies and chocolate chip crumbs around her mouth. "I got extra because Mrs. Henderson said I played really good. Also because I told her we didn't have any cookies at home, which might not be completely true, but it worked." "We have cookies at home," Noah said. "Okay, so I lied a little, but for a good cause. Cookies!" She offered one to Clara. "Here, you get one too for coming to my concert." Clara accepted the slightly crumbled cookie. "Thank you, Mila. That's very thoughtful. Dad taught me it's important to share. Also that lying is bad, but sometimes white lies are okay if they're about unimportant things and don't hurt anyone." Mila looked up at Noah. "Right? That's a very nuanced interpretation of what I said." "I'm nuanced." She said it like she'd just learned the word and was excited to use it. They stayed for another 20 minutes, making small talk with other parents and teachers. Clara watched Noah navigate the social dynamics with quiet competence, remembering names, asking appropriate questions, maintaining the careful balance between friendly and professional that single parents seem to master. Mila alternated between showing off her recorder skills to anyone who would listen and stealing extra cookies when she thought no one was watching. Walking out to the parking lot later, Clara fell into step beside them. The December air had that particular cold that meant frost would come overnight, and she pulled her coat tighter. "Thank you again," Noah said when they reached his car. "For coming, for the cookie, for caring enough to show up." "It's not a hardship, Noah. I enjoyed myself." "Even the part where recorders committed crimes against music?" "Especially that part." Mila was already in the car, buckling herself in with practiced efficiency. Through the window, she waved enthusiastically at Clara. Noah hesitated, then spoke quickly, as though afraid he'd lose courage. "Do you want to come over for dinner tomorrow? Nothing fancy, just whatever I manage not to burn. Mila would love it, and..." He paused. "I'd love it too." Clara felt the question's weight, understanding what it represented. Not just dinner, but another step forward. An invitation into his actual home, his real life, the carefully constructed world he'd built around his daughter. "I'd like that," she said. "What time?" 6? Mila goes to bed at 8, which gives us a few hours. He smiled, and it carried nervous energy. "Fair warning, our place is lived in chaos. Toys everywhere, questionable artwork on the fridge, a general sense that organization is a concept we've heard about but never implemented." "Sounds perfect." She gave him her number again, watched him drive away with Mila's face pressed against the window, still waving, then sat in her own car processing everything. The concert, the conversation, the dinner invitation. Each one was a small step, but together they formed a pattern of increasing intimacy that both thrilled and terrified her. Clara drove home through Friday night traffic, her mind already planning what to bring tomorrow. Wine seemed too formal, flowers too romantic, nothing too casual. She settled on dessert, something Mila would enjoy but wouldn't cause a sugar apocalypse. Her apartment felt especially empty when she arrived. She'd lived here for years, had decorated it carefully, had built a life that fit her perfectly. But standing in the quiet, looking at her pristine kitchen and her coordinated furniture and her perfect view of the city, Clara realized something fundamental had shifted. This space no longer felt like home. It felt like a stage set, carefully constructed performance of what her life was supposed to look like. She thought about Noah's warning about lived-in chaos, about toys and questionable artwork, about a house that bore the marks of actually being occupied by people who loved each other. And she found herself wanting that more than the perfect aesthetics of her carefully controlled environment. The next evening, Clara stood outside Noah's house in a quiet Ballard neighborhood, clutching a bakery box of cupcakes and trying to calm her nerves. The house was a small craftsman with a sagging porch and a yard that showed signs of being loved, but not meticulously maintained. String lights hung along the porch railing, and through the front window she could see Mila's silhouette moving in what appeared to be an elaborate dance. Before she could knock, the door flew open and Mila stood there grinning. "You're here! Dad said you might not come, but I knew you would because you said you would, and you don't lie." "Mila, let her get inside before you interrogate her." Noah appeared behind his daughter, wearing jeans and a sweater that looked soft and lived in. "Sorry, subtle welcoming is still a work in progress." "No apology needed?" Clara stepped inside, and her first impression was that Noah hadn't been exaggerating about the chaos. The living room held an explosion of toys, books, and what appeared to be an elaborate blanket fort. The walls were covered in children's artwork, some clearly Mila's, others perhaps gifts from friends. The furniture was mismatched but comfortable looking, the kind that invited you to actually sit instead of admire. "I brought dessert," Claire said, holding up the bakery box. "Cupcakes." Mila peered into the box. "Are those the fancy ones from Pike Place?" "They might be." "Dad, Clara brought fancy cupcakes. That means she really likes us." Noah caught Clara's eye over his daughter's head, amusement and something warmer in his expression. "That's quite the deduction." "It's true, though," Mila insisted. "Regular cupcakes are like $5. Fancy cupcakes are like $20. That's a mathematical proof of liking someone." "I can't argue with mathematical proof," Clara said, charmed despite herself. Dinner was spaghetti with garlic bread and salad, simple but good. They ate in the kitchen at a table scarred with years of use, Mila providing running commentary about everything from her day at school to her ongoing campaign for dog ownership to her theory that penguins were actually aliens studying humans. "That's very creative," Clara said, "but I'm not sure the evidence supports it." "Yet," Mila corrected. "The evidence doesn't support it yet. But absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. Dad taught me that." "Did he also teach you to apply it to penguin conspiracy theories?" "He taught me to apply it to everything. Also, penguins are suspicious. They wear tuxedos in Antarctica. Why would you dress fancy if you weren't trying to blend in while secretly observing humanity?" Noah shook his head, but he was smiling. "This is what happens when you teach your kid critical thinking. She uses it against you." After dinner, Mila performed an impromptu puppet show using stuffed animals and the blanket fort, then reluctantly agreed to get ready for bed. Clara helped clear the table while Noah supervised teeth brushing and pajama wearing, and for a few moments she was alone in his kitchen. She studied the space, taking in the details. School artwork held to the refrigerator with magnets, a calendar covered in color-coded schedules, photographs scattered throughout, some recent of Mila, others older featuring a woman with kind eyes and dark hair. Sarah. Noah's late wife, present in the home they'd presumably shared, present in the daughter they'd created together. Clara felt a strange mix of emotions. Not jealousy exactly, but awareness that she was walking into a life that had been built around someone else, someone who'd left a hole that would never fully close. "Sorry about that." Noah reappeared, looking tired. "Bedtime is always a negotiation." "No apology needed? Your house is lovely." "It's a disaster zone." "It's lived in. There's a difference." Clara gestured toward the photographs. "Is that Sarah?" Noah followed her gaze, his expression softening. "Yeah, that was taken about 6 months before she died. We'd gone hiking in the Olympics. Mila was obsessed with finding the perfect rock." He was quiet for a moment. I know it's weird having pictures of my late wife everywhere when we're, whatever this is. It's not weird, it's honest. Clara moved closer. Noah, I'm not asking you to erase Sarah. She was part of your life, she's Mila's mother, and she deserves to be remembered. If I'm going to be part of your life, I'm going to be part of all of it, including the complicated parts. He looked at her with such intensity, it took her breath away. How are you real? I'm just honest. That's more rare than you realize. Noah stepped closer, closing the distance between them. Clara, I need you to understand something. I haven't done this since Sarah died, haven't wanted to, haven't even thought about it until you, and I'm terrified I'm going to mess it up. What if we mess it up together? He laughed, the sound carrying relief. That's actually perfect. They stood in his kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of his life. The dishes from dinner, Mila's artwork, the photographs of memory and loss. And Clara thought, this is what real looks like. Not perfect aesthetics or careful control, but actual life in all its messy, complicated beauty. I should probably go, she said, though she didn't want to. It's late, and Mila has school tomorrow. Right, of course. But Noah didn't move, and neither did Clara. Thank you for dinner, and for trusting me with this. She gestured vaguely at the space between them, encompassing everything they hadn't quite articulated. Thank you for showing up, Noah said quietly, literally and figuratively. He walked her to the door, and in that moment before she left, Clara felt the weight of possibility. They stood on the threshold of something undefined, something that could grow into something meaningful or could collapse under the pressure of complication. Good night, Noah. Good night, Clara. She walked to her car, started the engine, and drove home through dark streets. But this time, the emptiness of her apartment didn't feel quite so heavy, because she'd seen what the alternative could look like, had tasted it, breathed it in, felt it settle into her bones as something real and possible. Whatever came next would be complicated. But complications, Clara was learning, were just life insisting on being interesting. The following week brought what Clara's team had been anticipating for months, the annual corporate retreat in the San Juan Islands. 3 days of strategic planning sessions disguised as team building, held at a resort where the Pacific Northwest showed off its dramatic beauty. Clara had attended 7 of these retreats, and each time she'd maintained her careful professional distance, participating in the required activities while never quite letting her guard down. This year felt different before it even began. She stood in her office Friday morning, reviewing the attendance list. Noah's name appeared halfway down, and she felt that now familiar flutter of anticipation mixed with anxiety. 3 days in close quarters with limited escape routes. 3 days where the careful boundaries they'd been maintaining would be tested simply by proximity and context. Her phone buzzed with a text from Noah. Mila's spending the weekend with my sister in Tacoma. She's already planned their entire schedule, which apparently involves a trampoline park and unlimited ice cream. I may not get her back. Clara smiled despite her nerves. Sounds like she'll have a great time. Are you packed for the retreat? Define packed. I threw some clothes in a bag and hoped for the best. You? Meticulously organized 3 days ago, color-coded by activity. That's either impressive or concerning. I haven't decided which. It can be both. The ferry ride to the islands departed at noon. Clara arrived at the terminal to find most of her team already gathered, chatting in clusters while drinking overpriced coffee from the terminal cafe. Noah stood slightly apart, hands in his pockets, watching the water with that contemplative expression she'd come to recognize. Ready for 3 days of mandatory fun? She asked, coming up beside him. He turned and his face relaxed into something genuine. As ready as I'll ever be. Fair warning, I'm terrible at trust falls and any activity involving ropes courses. Good thing we're doing neither, just strategic planning sessions and a lot of sitting around talking about quarterly objectives. That sounds like its own kind of torture. Welcome to executive life. The ferry horn blasted, signaling boarding. They joined the stream of people moving toward the vessel, finding seats on the upper deck where the view opened up across the sound. The day was surprisingly clear, Mount Rainier visible in the distance like a sentinel watching over the water. Marcus settled into the seat across from them, looking far too cheerful for someone about to spend 3 days in work retreat hell. Whitman, Brooks, excited for team bonding? Thrilled beyond measure, Clara said dryly. That's the spirit. I heard they're doing something new this year, some kind of personality assessment, followed by group discussions about communication styles. Because nothing says fun like analyzing why Jenkins from accounting drives everyone insane. Jenkins drives everyone insane because he sends 17 follow-up emails for every request, Noah said. Exactly. But now we'll have a psychological framework for understanding his compulsive email disorder. Marcus grinned. I love corporate retreats. Where else do you get paid to take boat rides and eat catered food while pretending to work? Sarah Kim joined them, carrying an enormous coffee and looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. Tell me again why we couldn't just do this via Zoom? Because Zoom doesn't allow for authentic connection and vulnerable team building, Marcus said, in a pitch-perfect imitation of their CEO's voice. Right, because nothing says authentic connection like forced small talk with people you see 40 hours a week anyway. They spent the hour-long ferry ride in easy conversation, the kind that happened when people were released from their normal environment and allowed to just exist together. Clara found herself relaxing despite her usual vigilance, laughing at Marcus's increasingly outrageous stories about past retreats and listening to Sarah's theories about which team members would crack first under the pressure of enforced proximity. But she was also hyper-aware of Noah beside her, the way he listened more than he spoke, only contributing when he had something meaningful to add. How his laugh, when it came, was genuine rather than performative. The fact that twice their arms brushed against each other and neither pulled away, letting the contact linger for a moment before naturally separating. The resort sat on a cliff overlooking the water, all weathered wood and floor-to-ceiling windows designed to showcase the view. Clara had stayed here before and knew the rooms were comfortable but not luxurious, the food good but not memorable. It was exactly the kind of place corporations chose for retreats. Nice enough to feel like a perk, rustic enough to feel authentic, remote enough that people couldn't easily escape. Check-in was organized chaos. Tim Hawking stood near the reception desk with a clipboard, directing people to their rooms like a camp counselor organizing cabin assignments. Claire received her key and was heading toward the stairs when she heard her name. Clara, wait up. Noah jogged over, holding his own key. Looks like we're on the same floor, room 218. 218, Clara said, her heart doing something complicated. Right next door. Is that going to be weird? Probably, but most things about this situation are weird, so at least we're consistent. He smiled, and they climbed the stairs together. The second-floor hallway was narrow, with rooms on either side and windows at both ends offering views of the water. Sure enough, their rooms were adjacent, doors nearly touching. Well, Noah said, unlocking his door, at least if one of us has a middle-of-the-night crisis about quarterly projections, the other is conveniently located. That's definitely the kind of crisis I was worried about. What kind were you worried about? Clara met his eyes, seeing the question beneath the question. The kind where proximity and limited escape routes lead to poor decision-making. Ah, that kind. Noah was quiet for a moment. For what it's worth, I'm worried about the same thing. That's either comforting or terrifying. Both, definitely both. He pushed open his door. I should unpack, or more accurately, stare at my suitcase and regret my packing choices. Good luck with that. Clara entered her own room, which was exactly as she remembered from previous years. Queen bed with a quilted comforter, wooden dresser that had seen better days, small bathroom with questionable water pressure. The window offered a view of the Sound, gray-blue water stretching toward distant islands. She unpacked with her usual efficiency, arranging clothes in the dresser and hanging her business casual options in the closet. Then she sat on the bed and tried to process the reality that Noah was literally on the other side of the wall, that for 3 days they'd be in constant proximity without the buffer of office structures and normal routines. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Emergency meeting in the lobby in 30. Apparently they're starting with icebreakers. May God have mercy on our souls. The next 3 hours were exactly as advertised, a series of trust-building exercises and personality assessments that ranged from mildly interesting to actively painful. Clara learned that she was an INTJ, which surprised exactly no one, and that her communication style was direct, which she could have told them without a 40-question survey. Noah was apparently an ISFJ, And during the group discussion about how different personality types work together, the facilitator made an offhand comment about INTJs and ISFJs often forming strong partnerships because they balanced each other's strengths and weaknesses. Marcus, sitting beside Clara, whispered, "Well, that's convenient," and she fought the urge to kick him under the table. Dinner was served buffet style in the main dining room, and people naturally segregated into their usual work clusters. Clara found herself at a table with Marcus, Sarah, Noah, and Tim, discussing everything from the Seahawks' disappointing season to the best coffee shops in Seattle to whether artificial intelligence would eventually make their jobs obsolete. "I'm not worried," Sarah said, spearing a piece of chicken. "AI can crunch numbers and identify patterns, but it can't navigate human relationships or make judgment calls based on context. We're safe for at least another decade." "Optimistic timeline," Tim said. "I give it 5 years before half of us are replaced by algorithms." "Then we'll all become artists or philosophers," Noah said. "Embrace the things computers can't do." "You paint?" Clara asked, genuinely curious. "God, no. I was speaking hypothetically. My artistic skills max out at stick figures." He smiled. "But I appreciate the arts. Sarah used to drag me to museums and galleries. She said it was important to feed your brain things besides work and worry." It was the first time he'd mentioned his late wife in a group setting. Clara watched the others react. Sarah's expression softening with sympathy, Marcus nodding with understanding, Tim looking momentarily uncomfortable before recovering. But Noah seemed at ease with it, as though he'd made peace with incorporating her memory into casual conversation. After dinner, there was supposed to be a bonfire on the beach with s'mores and acoustic guitar, because apparently corporate retreats operated on summer camp logic. Clara considered skipping it, claiming exhaustion or work emails, but found herself following the group down the wooden stairs to the rocky beach below. Someone had built an impressive fire in a stone pit. Marshmallows appeared, along with graham crackers and chocolate bars still in their packaging. The guitar player turned out to be Jenkins from accounting, who was surprisingly competent at playing folk songs everyone half remembered from childhood. Clara sat on a piece of driftwood worn smooth by water and time, watching flames dance against the darkening sky. The temperature had dropped with sunset, and she pulled her jacket tighter, grateful she'd thought to bring layers. "Room for one more?" Noah's voice came from behind her. "Always." He settled beside her close enough that their shoulders touched. Around them, conversations rose and fell, people laughing at inside jokes and reminiscing about past retreats. But in their small bubble, there was comfortable silence. "This is nice," Noah said eventually. "I mean, the forced team building is painful, but this part, sitting by a fire watching the water, this is actually nice." "Agreed, though I could do without Jenkins singing Kumbaya. He's really committed to the bit." "He is." Clara turned to look at Noah, his face lit by firelight. "Can I ask you something? You seem to start a lot of conversations that way." "I like to give fair warning before asking potentially invasive questions." "Fair enough. Ask away." Clara chose her words carefully. "Earlier today, when you mentioned Sarah to the group, you seemed comfortable with it. But at work, you never talk about her. Why the difference?" Noah was quiet, staring at the fire. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "At work, bringing up my dead wife feels like asking for special treatment, like I'm using tragedy to get sympathy or understanding or whatever. It puts people in an uncomfortable position where they feel obligated to respond with some kind of platitude." He paused. "But here, with people I'm starting to actually know rather than just work with, it feels different. Like I can mention her as part of my story without it becoming the entire story." "That makes sense." "Does it? Sometimes I think I'm making up rules that don't actually exist, trying to control how people perceive me because I'm terrified of being defined by loss." Clara understood that fear intimately. "You're not making up rules. You're trying to maintain agency over your own narrative. That's different." "Is it working?" "I don't know. Is it?" Noah smiled, the expression carrying a mixture of resignation and hope. "Honestly, I have no idea. But sitting here with you, watching a fire on a beach while Jenkins massacres Bob Dylan, I feel more like myself than I have in years, so maybe it's working better than I thought." Before Clara could respond, Marcus appeared with marshmallows and an expression of determined enthusiasm. "Whitman,"
Brooks, you cannot attend a beach bonfire without participating in the sacred ritual of s'mores construction. It's basically un-American. I'm not sure that's actually true, Clara said. It's definitely true. Come on, humor me. He thrust marshmallows at them. I've already lost all credibility as CFO by singing along to Jenkins. Let me salvage my dignity through properly toasted marshmallows. They spent the next hour engaged in the surprisingly competitive activity of marshmallow roasting. Marcus insisted there was a correct level of toastedness, golden brown without any char, while Sarah argued that slightly burnt was superior.
Tim managed to set 3 marshmallows on fire in rapid succession, and Noah revealed a hidden talent for achieving perfect caramelization. "How are you this good at marshmallows?" Clara asked, watching him produce yet another flawlessly toasted specimen. "Years of practice camping with Mila. She's a harsh critic of marshmallow technique." He assembled his s'more with careful precision. "Want to know the secret?" "Desperately. Patience and constant rotation. You can't just stick it in the fire and hope for the best. You have to keep moving, keep adjusting, pay attention to what's happening." "That's very philosophical for a marshmallow." "I contain multitudes." He offered her half of his s'more. "Here, taste perfection." Clara accepted it, their fingers brushing in the exchange. The s'more was, she had to admit, perfectly executed. The marshmallow just melted enough to bind with the chocolate, the graham crackers providing textural contrast. "That's actually really good. Actually, I told you, I'm a marshmallow savant." Around them, people were starting to drift back toward the resort, claiming early meetings or exhaustion from the day's activities. The fire was burning lower, embers glowing red in the darkness. Clara knew she should leave too, maintain appropriate distance, not linger in this intimate bubble of firelight and ocean sounds. Instead, she stayed. And so did Noah. When they were the last 2 remaining, he turned to her with an expression that was both serious and searching. "Clara, can I be honest about something?" "Always." "This being here with you, away from the office and normal structures, it's making it very hard to maintain professional boundaries. And I'm not sure I want to maintain them anymore." Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I'm tired of pretending this is just friendly colleagues getting to know each other. I'm saying that I think about you constantly, and it's affecting my ability to focus on anything else. I'm saying that sitting next to you right now, I want nothing more than to kiss you, and the only thing stopping me is the awareness that we're still technically at a work function and that crosses about 17 different lines." He took a breath. "I'm saying I'm in dangerous territory here, and I'm not sure I want to be rescued." The words hung between them, honest and vulnerable and terrifying in their implications. Clara felt the weight of the moment, understanding that her response would determine everything that came next. "I'm in the same territory," she said quietly, "and I don't want to be rescued either." Noah's eyes searched her face. "So what do we do?" "I don't know. But I know I'm tired of being careful, tired of calculating appropriate distance and maintaining professional boundaries when all I want is to know what it feels like to not have those walls between us." "Clara, I know all the reasons this is complicated. You report to me, you have a daughter, you're still processing loss. I'm not naive about any of it, but I also know that what I feel when I'm with you is real, and running from it because it's inconvenient seems like the worst kind of cowardice." Noah was quiet for a long moment, the fire crackling between them. Then he stood and extended his hand. "Come on, let's walk." Clara took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. They left the dying fire and walked along the beach, waves lapping at the shore in steady rhythm. The moon had risen, casting silver light across the water. It was cold enough that Clara's breath came out in visible puffs, but she barely noticed. They walked in silence for several minutes, still holding hands. The contact felt monumental, a physical acknowledgement of everything they'd been circling around for weeks. When they finally stopped, they'd reached a rocky outcropping that blocked the view of the resort. "I need to tell you something," Noah said, turning to face her, "about why I really changed careers after Sarah died. You said it was because of Mila, because you needed more time with her." "That's true, but it's not the whole truth." He looked out at the water, jaw tight with tension. "The real reason is that after Sarah died, I stopped caring about anything beyond basic survival. Getting out of bed, making sure Mila ate, showing up at work. That was the extent of my capacity. Everything else, ambition, career trajectory, professional development, it all felt meaningless. That's understandable given what you were dealing with. Maybe, but it also meant I wasn't the person my employer needed me to be. I was making mistakes, missing deadlines, losing focus during critical meetings. They were patient for a while, but eventually it became clear I needed to either get my act together or step down. He paused. I chose to step down before they could fire me. Took a lesser position at Meridian, told myself it was about being present for Mila, which was true. But it was also about accepting that I wasn't capable of being who I used to be. Clara felt the weight of his confession, understanding what it cost him to share it. And now? Now I'm starting to remember what it feels like to care about something beyond just surviving, to want things, to imagine a future that looks different than the one I've been living. He met her eyes. You make me want to be more than I've been, and that's both wonderful and terrifying. Noah, let me finish, please. He took a breath. If we do this, whatever this is, you need to understand that I come with complications. A daughter who's my entire world. A late wife whose memory I'm not ready to abandon. A career I walked away from that I sometimes still mourn. Therapy appointments twice a month. A neighbor who's basically family and will absolutely interrogate you about your intentions. I'm not a simple package. I don't want a simple package. I want you, complications and all. Why? The question came out raw, vulnerable. You could have anyone. Someone without my baggage, without a kid, without the constant shadow of loss. Why choose this? Clara stepped closer, closing the distance between them. Because when I'm with you, I feel more myself than I have in years. Because you see through my executive armor to the actual person underneath. Because your daughter looks at you with such pure love it makes my chest ache. Because you've survived something devastating and still show up with kindness and patience and hope. She paused. Because I'm falling for you, Noah Brooks. And that's terrifying and wonderful and completely outside my control. Noah's expression cracked open, showing everything he usually kept hidden. Clara, She didn't let him finish. Instead, she closed the final distance between them and kissed him. For a moment, he froze. Then his arms came around her, pulling her closer as he kissed her back with an intensity that stole her breath. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was 3 weeks of denied attraction, of careful distance, of wanting something they'd told themselves was impossible. It was recognition and relief, and the particular sweetness of finally giving in to what had been inevitable from the start. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Noah rested his forehead against hers. We just crossed a very significant line. I'm aware. There's no going back from this. I don't want to go back. Clara, we need to think about Noah. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. I've spent my entire adult life thinking, planning, calculating outcomes. Just this once, can we not overthink? Can we just be two people who want each other and see what happens? He studied her face, and she could see him processing, weighing concerns against desire. Then something in his expression shifted, and he smiled with genuine warmth. Okay, yes. Let's see what happens. They kissed again, slower this time, taking their time exploring the newness of physical contact. Clara felt years of careful control dissolve, replaced by the simple pleasure of being held by someone who understood her in ways she hadn't known were possible. Eventually, the cold became impossible to ignore. They walked back along the beach, hand in hand, neither speaking but both hyper-aware of what had just changed between them. The resort came back into view, windows lit against the darkness. We should probably talk about Monday, Noah said as they climbed the stairs from the beach, about how this works when we're back in the office. Monday can wait. Right now, let's just focus on the next 2 days. They entered the resort lobby, which was empty except for the night clerk reading behind the desk. The elevator ride to the second floor felt charged with possibility and uncertainty. When they reached their adjacent doors, they stood in the hallway facing each other. I should let you get some sleep, Noah said, but he didn't move. You should. Clara. His voice was soft, questioning. Yes? Can I kiss you again? Instead of answering, she pulled him close and kissed him with all the pent-up wanting she'd been suppressing for weeks. His hands came up to frame her face, gentle and sure, and Clara felt something fundamental shift inside her chest. This was what she'd been missing, what she'd convinced herself she didn't need. Connection, intimacy, the particular vulnerability of letting someone see you completely. When they finally separated, Noah looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Good night, Clara." "Good night." She let herself into her room and leaned against the closed door, heart racing. On the other side of the wall, she could hear Noah moving around, the creak of floorboards, the sound of running water. The proximity felt both comforting and overwhelming. Clara got ready for bed mechanically, her mind replaying the kiss, the conversation, the moment Noah had taken her hand and everything had shifted irrevocably. She'd crossed a professional boundary she'd spent her entire career defending. She'd admitted feelings for someone whose life was complicated in ways she was only beginning to understand. She'd chosen vulnerability over control, possibility over safety. And lying in bed in the darkness, listening to the ocean through the window and the faint sounds of Noah settling into his own room next door, Clara felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Peace. The next morning arrived with gray light and the smell of coffee drifting up from the dining room. Clara woke feeling simultaneously exhausted and energized, her mind immediately returning to the beach, the kiss, the weight of Noah's arms around her. She dressed carefully in jeans and a soft sweater, then stared at herself in the bathroom mirror trying to determine if she looked different, if what had happened last night showed on her face. Her phone buzzed with a text from Noah. "Morning? Coffee?" Clara smiled at her reflection, desperately. "Meet you downstairs in 10. The dining room was already half full, people loading plates from the breakfast buffet and claiming tables. Clara spotted Noah near the windows, 2 coffee cups in front of him. He looked up as she approached, and the smile that crossed his face was warm and genuine and entirely lacking in the guardedness she'd grown used to seeing. "Good morning," he said as she sat down. "I got you coffee. Black with 1 sugar, right?" "Perfect. Thank you." She took a sip, grateful for the caffeine. "How did you sleep?" "Terribly. Spent most of the night replaying yesterday and wondering if I'd hallucinated the entire thing." "You didn't." "Good to know." He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "So, this is new territory." "Extremely new. Any regrets?" Clara met his eyes without hesitation. "None. You?" "Not even a little. Which is either a good sign or proof that I've completely lost my judgment." "I'm going with good sign." They were interrupted by Sarah joining them, looking like she'd had about as much sleep as Clara felt. "Morning. Please tell me one of you has aspirin. Marcus decided last night that he could outdrink everyone, and while I wasn't participating, I absorbed secondhand terrible decisions through proximity." "I have some in my room," Noah said. "Want me to grab it?" "You're a saint. Yes, please." He departed, and Sarah turned to Clara with a speculative look. "So? You two seem cozy this morning." "We had a good conversation last night." Conversation, right." Sarah's smile was knowing. "Clara, I've worked with you for 3 years. I've never seen you look at anyone the way you look at Brooks. And the way he looks at you? That man is falling hard." "Sarah, I'm not judging. I think it's great. You both deserve something good." She paused. "But you know it's going to be complicated when we get back to Seattle, right? The reporting structure alone is going to raise HR flags." "I'm aware of the complications." "And you're doing it anyway." "I'm doing it anyway." Sarah nodded slowly. "Then I'm happy for you. Genuinely. Just be careful, okay? Not everyone is going to be as understanding as me." Noah returned with aspirin, and the conversation shifted to safer topics. The day's scheduled activities, predictions about which personality assessment exercises would be most painful, speculation about whether the Wi-Fi would hold up for the afternoon's remote presentations. But underneath it all, Clara was acutely aware of Noah beside her, the way their feet occasionally touched under the table, the secret they were carrying. The day unfolded with more team-building exercises, this time focused on problem-solving and collaboration. They were divided into groups and given various challenges: building structures out of random materials, solving logic puzzles, navigating trust courses that involved blindfolds and verbal directions. Clara found herself in a group with Noah, Marcus, and two people from the finance team she didn't know well. Their task was to build the tallest freestanding structure possible using only straws, tape, and paper clips. It was exactly the kind of ridiculous corporate exercise Clara normally approached with barely concealed disdain. But working alongside Noah, watching him think through problems with quiet competence, she found herself actually enjoying the process. If we create a triangular base, it'll be more stable, Noah suggested, already arranging straws into the proposed configuration. But a square base gives us more surface area, one of the finance guys argued. Surface area doesn't matter if the whole thing collapses. Triangles distribute weight more efficiently. Noah glanced up. Physics, trust me. They went with his design, and their structure ended up winning by nearly 6 inches. Marcus crowed with victory while the finance team members high-fived, and Noah met Clara's eyes across the table with quiet satisfaction. During the lunch break, she found him outside on the deck overlooking the water. He was leaning against the railing, face tilted toward the weak winter sun. Hiding from the crowd? She asked, joining him. Taking a moment of silence before the afternoon sessions destroy what's left of my will to live. He turned to her with a smile. Though I have to admit, this is better than I expected.
The company's not terrible.
High praise. I'm not known for excessive enthusiasm. I've noticed. Clara stood close enough that their arms touched. Thank you for last night, for being honest about everything. Thank you for not running away screaming when you realized how complicated my life is. Your life is complicated. Mine is too, just in different ways. Maybe we balance each other out. Like INTJs and ISFJs, Noah said, referencing yesterday's personality assessment. Exactly like that. They stood in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching waves roll in against the rocky shore below. Clara thought about how different this felt from her usual retreat experiences. How in past years she'd counted down the hours until she could return to her normal life. How this time she found herself wishing they had more time in this suspended reality where hierarchies felt less important and connection felt more real. I talked to my sister this morning, Noah said. About Mila. She's having a great time, apparently, already planning their next visit. That's good. It is. But it also made me realize I need to talk to Mila about us, about what's happening between you and me. He turned to face Clara fully. She already likes you, but there's a difference between liking Dad's friend and understanding that there might be something more serious developing. How do you think she'll react? Honestly, I think she'll be thrilled. She's been not so subtly suggesting I should date for over a year now. Her exact words were, Dad, you need someone to kiss besides me because forehead kisses don't count as romance. Clara laughed. She really said that? She's 8 going on 35, remember? No filter whatsoever. Noah's expression turned serious. But I need to make sure she understands that you're not replacing her mother, that Sarah will always be her mom, and this is something different, something new. That makes sense. Do you want me there when you have that conversation? Maybe not the first one. Let me feel it out, see how she responds. Then we can figure out next steps together. He reached for her hand, twining their fingers together. Is this okay, being affectionate where people might see? We're not in the office, and honestly, I'm tired of hiding. Clara squeezed his hand. But if you're not comfortable, I'm comfortable, just making sure you are. They were interrupted by Marcus calling from the doorway. Lovebirds, afternoon session starting. Come pretend to care about synergy and strategic alignment. Noah groaned. I forgot we had to do more of this. Only 3 more hours, then we're free until dinner. 3 hours. I can survive 3 hours. He released her hand reluctantly. But tonight, after the official activities are done, can we just exist somewhere quiet? No crowds, no forced interaction, just us? That sounds perfect. The afternoon sessions were exactly as tedious as promised. They discussed strategic priorities for the coming year, broke into smaller groups to brainstorm initiatives, and endured a presentation from the CEO about corporate values that managed to use the word synergy 14 times. Clara took notes because it was expected, but her mind kept drifting to the evening ahead to the promise of time alone with Noah, away from watching eyes. When they were finally released, people scattered to their rooms to change for dinner. Clara showered and dressed in dark jeans and a cream-colored sweater, then stood at her window watching the sun descend toward the horizon. Her phone buzzed with a text from Noah. Change of plans. Meet me at the North Trailhead in 20 minutes. I have an idea. Clara responded immediately. I'll be there. She grabbed her jacket and headed downstairs, slipping out a side door to avoid the main lobby where people were already gathering for pre-dinner drinks. The North Trailhead was marked with a weathered wooden sign, leading into the forest that covered most of the island. She found Noah waiting there, wearing hiking boots and carrying a backpack. What's all this? She asked. Dinner alternative. I checked with the kitchen, and they were happy to pack us a picnic if it meant 2 fewer people to serve. He patted the backpack. I also may have sweet-talked the concierge into telling me about a spot about 15 minutes up this trail where the view is supposedly incredible. You planned a private dinner. I planned an escape from mandatory socializing disguised as a private dinner. There's a difference. He grinned. Unless you'd rather go back and make small talk with Jenkins about his email management philosophy? Lead the way. They hiked up the trail in the fading light, their breath visible in the cold air. The path wound through towering evergreens, the ground carpeted with fallen needles that muffled their footsteps. Noah navigated with confidence, occasionally pointing out landmarks or interesting trees, clearly comfortable in outdoor spaces. After about 20 minutes, they emerged into a small clearing that opened up to reveal a stunning view of the Sound. The sun had nearly set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reflected off the water below. Someone had placed a rough wooden bench at the edge of the clearing, positioned perfectly to take in the view. The concierge did not oversell this, Clara said, taking in the scene. Right? Noah set down his backpack and started unpacking. I have sandwiches, chips, fruit, and cookies, also a thermos of coffee because I'm not a barbarian. They settled on the bench, eating and watching the light change across the water. It felt almost surreal. 2 days ago, they'd been carefully maintaining professional distance, and now they were sitting together in comfortable intimacy, sharing food and space and the particular quiet that comes from being completely at ease with another person. Can I ask you something? Noah said eventually. Always. What made you decide to take a chance on this? On me, I mean. You could have kept things professional, maintained appropriate distance. It would have been safer. Clara thought about her answer, wanting to get it right. I've spent most of my adult life choosing safe, building a career, maintaining control, never letting anyone get too close. And it worked. I'm successful, respected, financially secure. But I'm also lonely in ways I didn't fully acknowledge until I met you. She paused. Sitting on that balcony at the holiday party, talking to you about real things instead of corporate small talk, I realized I'd forgotten what it felt like to actually connect with someone. And then every conversation after that just reinforced it. You make me want to take risks. That's a lot of pressure. It's not pressure, it's just honesty. Noah was quiet for a moment. When Sarah died, I convinced myself I'd used up my chance at this. At love, at partnership, at building something meaningful with another person. I had Mila, which was more than enough reason to keep going. But the idea of opening myself up to that kind of vulnerability again? He shook his head. It seemed impossible. Then you walked into my life with your executive armor and your direct questions and your complete inability to do polite deflection, and suddenly impossible started feeling like maybe. Just maybe? Definitely maybe. He turned to face her fully. Clara, I'm terrified of screwing this up, of hurting you, of confusing Mila, of losing my job if HR decides we've crossed too many lines. But I'm more terrified of walking away and spending the rest of my life wondering what could have been. Clara set down her sandwich and took his hand. Then let's be terrified together. Let's figure it out as we go, make mistakes, and trust that we're both mature enough to handle whatever comes. When you put it that way, it sounds almost reasonable. I'm very good at making unreasonable things sound reasonable. It's a key executive skill. Noah laughed, and the sound carried pure warmth. They finished eating as the last light faded from the sky, then sat together on the bench watching stars emerge overhead. It was fully dark by the time they packed up and headed back down the trail, using Noah's phone flashlight to navigate the path. They emerged from the forest to find the resort lit up like a beacon, music and laughter drifting from the dining hall where the official dinner was underway. But instead of joining it, they slipped in through a side entrance and climbed the stairs to the second floor. At their adjacent doors, they paused. Clara knew she should go into her own room, maintain at least the appearance of propriety, but standing there in the dim hallway, looking at Noah's face in the shadows, propriety felt like the last thing she wanted. "Do you want to come in?" she asked quietly. Noah's expression shifted, desire and caution warring across his features. "Clara, if I come in, I don't trust myself to leave anytime soon." "Maybe I don't want you to leave. We should probably think about—" She kissed him, cutting off whatever reasonable objection he was about to raise. He resisted for maybe half a second before pulling her closer, his hand sliding into her hair as he deepened the kiss. Clara felt any remaining doubt dissolve, replaced by certainty and want and the particular freedom of finally giving in completely. "Okay," Noah said when they broke apart, both breathing hard. "Okay. Yes. Let's not overthink this." Clara unlocked her door and pulled him inside. For the rest of the night, the complications waiting for them back in Seattle ceased to matter. There was just this: two people discovering each other, learning the geography of want and trust, and the particular intimacy of allowing yourself to be fully known. Hours later, lying tangled together in the darkness, Clara felt Noah's steady breathing against her shoulder and thought about how much her life had changed in just a few weeks. How she'd gone from carefully controlled isolation to this, vulnerable and exposed, and more herself than she'd been in years. "Are you awake?" Noah's voice was barely a whisper. "Yes." "I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and discover this was all an elaborate dream." "If it is, we're having the same dream, which seems statistically unlikely." He laughed softly. "Fair point." His arms tightened around her. "Clara, thank you for taking a chance on this, on me. Thank you for being worth the chance." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, the world outside temporarily forgotten. Tomorrow would bring the final day of the retreat, and Monday would bring reality and all its complications. But for now, in the darkness of a room overlooking the Pacific, two people who'd been alone for too long had found each other. And that was enough. Morning arrived too soon, pale winter light filtering through curtains Clara had forgotten to close. She woke to find Noah already awake, propped on one elbow, watching her with an expression that was equal parts tender and uncertain. "How long have you been staring at me?" she asked, her voice rough with sleep. "Not staring, observing. There's a difference." He traced a gentle line down her arm. "Also trying to figure out how to navigate the fact that in about 3 hours, we have to go back to being professional colleagues who definitely didn't spend the night together. We could just not go back. Tempting, but I think people would notice our absence." Clara rolled toward him, tucking herself against his chest. 5 more minutes, then we'll deal with reality." They took 10, then 15, neither wanting to be the first to break the spell. But eventually, Noah's phone alarm shattered the quiet, and the day's demands could no longer be ignored. Clara watched him dress with the efficiency of someone used to operating on limited time, every movement economical and purposeful. "I should go back to my room before the hallway gets busy," he said, buttoning his shirt. "But Clara, last night was—" He paused, searching for words. "I don't have adequate vocabulary for what last night was." "Neither do I, which is saying something because I usually have excellent vocabulary." He smiled, leaning down to kiss her with a gentleness that made her chest ache. "I'll see you at breakfast. We'll pretend this never happened, make awkward small talk, and internally combust from the effort of maintaining professional distance." "Sounds perfect." After he left, Clara lay in bed for a few more minutes, processing everything. She'd crossed so many lines in the past 12 hours that she'd lost count. Slept with someone who reported to her, however indirectly. Chose personal desire over professional judgment. Allowed herself to be vulnerable with someone who had every reason to guard his own heart carefully. And lying there in the rumpled sheets, feeling the ghost of his touch on her skin, she couldn't summon even a whisper of regret. The final day of the retreat was mercifully short, a morning wrap-up session where people shared insights from the weekend, followed by lunch and departure via the afternoon ferry. Clara sat through the discussion maintaining her usual composure, contributing appropriately, giving no indication that her world had fundamentally shifted overnight. Noah sat across the circle, equally controlled,
his expression neutral as people talked about communication styles and team dynamics. But twice their eyes met, and in those brief moments Clara saw everything he was carefully not saying. The memory of last night written in the tension of his jaw, the slight curve of his mouth, the way he couldn't quite look away as quickly as he should.
"Whitman, you've been quiet," Marcus observed. "Any profound insights to share with the group?" Clara pulled her attention back to the discussion. Just that effective teams require vulnerability as much as competence. You can have all the skills in the world, but if people aren't willing to be honest about challenges and limitations, those skills don't matter nearly as much. "Spoken like someone who's been thinking deeply about trust," Sarah said with a knowing look. "It's been an illuminating weekend." After lunch, people scattered to pack and check out. Clara stood in her room, methodically folding clothes into her suitcase, when her phone buzzed with a text from Noah. "Can we talk before the ferry? Beach access? Same place as Friday night?" She responded immediately. "Give me 10 minutes." Clara finished packing, checked out at the front desk, and made her way down to the beach. Noah was already there, hands shoved in his pockets, staring out at the water. The day had turned gray, clouds rolling in from the Pacific carrying the promise of rain. "Hey," she said, coming up beside him. "Hey." He didn't look at her, his jaw tight with tension. "So, we should probably talk about Monday." "Probably." "I've been thinking about the reporting structure, about how this looks from HR's perspective, about all the ways this could become complicated." He finally turned to face her. "Clara, I don't want to put your career at risk. You've worked too hard to get where you are." "My career is my concern, not yours. But it affects both of us. If HR decides there's a conflict of interest, I'm the one who will be reassigned, or worse, which I can handle. I've changed jobs before. But you shouldn't have to deal with that scrutiny because I couldn't maintain appropriate boundaries." Clara felt frustration rise in her chest. "Noah, we both crossed those boundaries, together. This isn't something you did to me. I know that, but I also know how these situations get perceived. The woman in power, the man who reports to her. There's an automatic assumption that someone was taking advantage." His voice carried an edge of bitterness. "And it's not going to be you who faces questions about judgment or professionalism." "So what are you suggesting? That we pretend last night didn't happen? Go back to careful distance and professional courtesy?" "I don't know, maybe." He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture carrying frustration and uncertainty. "I just know that I can't be the reason your reputation gets damaged. I won't be that person." Clara stepped closer, forcing him to look at her. "Listen to me very carefully. I made a choice last night. A fully informed, completely voluntary choice. I'm not some naive executive who doesn't understand the implications of getting involved with someone in my organization. I know exactly what I'm risking, and I'm choosing to risk it anyway." "But why? Why risk everything you've built for something that might not even work?" "Because I'm tired of building a life that looks perfect from the outside but feels empty from the inside. Because you make me want things I'd convinced myself I didn't need. Because for the first time in years, I feel like I'm actually living instead of just managing existence." She paused, gathering courage. "Because I'm falling in love with you, Noah Brooks. And that terrifies me more than any professional consequence ever could." The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Noah's expression cracked open, showing everything he'd been trying to hold back. "Clara," his voice broke slightly. "I don't know how to do this. How to be in a relationship again after so long. How to introduce someone into Mila's life without screwing her up. How to navigate office politics while also navigating personal feelings. I'm terrified of failing at all of it." "Then we'll figure it out together. We'll make mistakes. We'll have difficult conversations. We'll hit obstacles we didn't anticipate. But we'll do it together, with honesty and trust and the understanding that neither of us has to be perfect." You make it sound so simple. It's not simple, but it doesn't have to be impossible either. Clara reached for his hand, twining their fingers together. "Here's what I know. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to request a meeting with HR to discuss the reporting structure. We'll figure out a solution that eliminates any direct conflict of interest. It might mean you transfer to a different team, or it might mean I recuse myself from any decisions that affect you directly. Whatever it takes to make this work within the rules. You do that? I do that. And more, if necessary. She squeezed his hand. Because this, what we have, is worth protecting. Even if it means dealing with corporate bureaucracy and uncomfortable conversations. Noah pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her in a fierce hug. I don't deserve you. That's for me to decide. And I've decided you do. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other against the wind coming off the water. Eventually, the practicalities of departure could no longer be ignored. They walked back to the resort together, collected their bags, and joined the stream of people heading to the ferry dock. The ride back to Seattle felt different from the journey out. People were quieter, energy depleted from 3 days of forced interaction. Clara found a seat near the window, and Noah settled beside her without asking, close enough that their shoulders touched. Across the aisle, Sarah caught Clara's eye and smiled with obvious approval. So, Marcus said, dropping into the seat in front of them and turning around to face them, are we going to acknowledge the elephant in the ferry, or are we all going to pretend we don't notice that you two are clearly together now? Marcus, Clara started, I'm not judging. I think it's great. You both look happier than I've seen either of you look in months. I'm just saying the discretion efforts need work. He grinned. Also, for the record, at least 3 people have asked me if something's going on between you two, and I've been playing dumb, but I expect compensation for my Oscar-worthy performance. What kind of compensation? Noah asked, amused despite himself. Details. How it happened, when it happened, whether it was as romantic as it looked from the outside. Marcus waggled his eyebrows. I live vicariously through other people's relationships. It's pathetic but honest. We're not providing details, Clara said firmly. Spoil sport. But Marcus's expression turned more serious. Real talk, though, you both know this is going to raise questions, right? HR is going to want to make sure there's no conflict of interest, and people are going to talk regardless of what the official stance is. We're aware, Claire said, and we're handling it. Good. Because you're both good people, and I'd hate to see this blow up in either of your faces. He glanced between them. For what it's worth, I think you make sense together. You balance each other out, Clara's intensity with Brooks's steadiness. It's actually kind of perfect. Thank you, Marcus, Noah said quietly. Don't mention it. Literally, don't mention that I said anything supportive. I have a reputation as a cynic to maintain. The ferry docked in Seattle late afternoon, rain falling in steady sheets that turned the city gray and soft. People scattered to their cars, calling goodbyes and promises to see each other Monday. Clara stood under the terminal's overhang, watching rain drum against the pavement, delaying the moment when she'd have to return to her empty apartment and the reality of what they'd started. Can I drive you home? Noah asked, appearing beside her with his keys in hand. I drove here, remember? My car's in the lot. Right, of course. He looked disappointed. I guess this is where we part ways until tomorrow. Clara made a decision. Or you could follow me back to my place. We could order dinner, avoid the cold, and postpone returning to real life for a few more hours. What about Mila? What time are you picking her up from your sister's? Not until tomorrow afternoon. She specifically requested an extra night of trampoline chaos. Noah smiled. She's probably going to come home exhausted and full of terrible ideas my sister taught her. Then you have time, if you want to. I want to. He said it without hesitation. Lead the way. They drove through rain-slicked streets to Capitol Hill, Noah's sedan following her car through traffic that was surprisingly light for a Sunday evening. Clara felt a flutter of nervousness as she pulled into her building's garage. This was different from the retreat. This was her actual space, her carefully curated life. Inviting Noah into it felt like crossing yet another line, making this real in ways that weekend escape had allowed them to avoid. Her apartment looked exactly as she'd left it Friday morning, pristine, organized, every surface clear of clutter. Noah stepped inside and did a slow turn, taking it all in. This is very you, he said finally. Is that a compliment? It's an observation. Everything has a place, nothing is accidental. It's impressive and slightly intimidating. Most things about me are slightly intimidating. I've noticed. He moved to the window, looking out at the city view. But also, there's barely any personal stuff. No photos, no random collections of things that make you happy. Just beautiful furniture and empty space. Clara felt defensive despite knowing he was right. I like minimalism. You like control. He turned to face her, which I understand. But Clara, you're allowed to have things just because they make you happy. You don't have to justify every object's existence with functionality. Says the man whose house is covered in his daughter's artwork. Exactly. And that artwork serves no functional purpose except making me smile when I see it. That's enough reason for it to exist. He crossed to her, cupping her face gently. You're allowed to prioritize happiness over aesthetics. I promise the world won't collapse if you add some chaos to your perfect space. Clara leaned into his touch, feeling something tight in her chest begin to loosen. You're very wise for someone who claims not to have his life together. I'm an excellent observer of other people's patterns. My own, not so much. They ordered Thai food and ate sitting on Clara's pristine couch, containers spread across the coffee table in defiance of her usual rules about eating in the living room. Noah told stories about his sister, about Mila's various schemes and observations, about the elaborate games she'd invented that involved stuffed animals and complex political intrigue. She wants to be president when she grows up, he said, stealing a spring roll from Clara's container. Not because she cares about politics, but because she likes the idea of making rules everyone has to follow. That's a concerning motivation for seeking office. I'm choosing to see it as leadership potential rather than dictatorial tendencies. He smiled, though I should probably start teaching her about checks and balances before she gets any big ideas. You're good with her, patient in ways a lot of parents aren't. Noah was quiet for a moment. I have to be. She's already dealing with loss most kids her age can't comprehend. The least I can do is give her stability and patience and the space to be exactly who she is. He paused, which is why I need to talk to her about us before this goes any further. She needs to understand what's happening, needs to have a voice in how this affects her life. When are you thinking? Tomorrow, after I pick her up, just the two of us, so she can ask questions without worrying about anyone else's reactions. He met Clara's eyes, and then, if she's okay with it, maybe you could come over for dinner later this week. Let her see us together in a context where it's clear this is something more than friendship. Clara's heart squeezed at the thought. I'd like that. But Noah, what if she's not okay with it? What if the idea of you being with someone upsets her? Then we slow down. We give her time to adjust, to process, to ask questions. Her well-being comes before anything else, including my happiness. His voice was firm. I know that's not fair to you, but it's the reality of dating a single parent. The kid always comes first. I wouldn't want it any other way. Clara reached for his hand. If Mila needs time, we take time. If she has concerns, we address them. This only works if everyone involved feels safe and heard. How are you so understanding about all of this? Because I care about both of you. And because rushing into something without considering the full impact would be selfish and short-sighted. She squeezed his hand. We have time, Noah. We don't have to figure everything out tonight. They talked until late, sprawled on the couch in comfortable intimacy. Noah shared more about Sarah, about their relationship and the life they'd built together, and Clara found herself grateful rather than threatened by his willingness to include his late wife in the conversation. It wasn't dwelling in the past. It was acknowledging that the past shaped who he was, and she was falling for all of him, including the parts marked by loss. Eventually, exhaustion caught up with them. Noah dozed off mid-sentence, his head resting against Clara's shoulder, and she carefully extracted herself to clean up the dinner containers. When she returned, he was still asleep, face relaxed in a way she rarely saw when he was awake. She covered him with a throw blanket and stood watching him for a moment, feeling a wave of affection so intense it was almost painful. This was real. This quiet man who'd walked into her carefully controlled life and turned everything sideways, who made her want to be more honest, more vulnerable, more willing to risk comfort for the possibility of actual happiness, who came with complications and responsibilities and a daughter who deserved protection above all else. Clara had spent years building walls, and in the span of a few weeks, Noah had walked through them like they were made of paper. Not by force, but by simply being himself, honest and present and completely lacking in pretense. She woke him gently, and he blinked up at her with sleepy confusion. I fell asleep? Spectacularly, complete with light snoring.
I don't snore. You absolutely snore. It's very dignified. He sat up, rubbing his face. I should probably head home. Get some actual sleep in my own bed before tomorrow. You could stay. The offer came out before Clara had fully thought it through. I mean, it's late, you're tired, and your bed is 40 minutes away. The couch pulls out, or I could sleep in your bed. With you. Like reasonable adults in a relationship. He stood, pulling her close. Is that what we're calling this? A relationship? I think after this weekend we've earned the title. Fair point. He kissed her, slow and sweet. Okay, I'll stay. But I need to leave early tomorrow. Have to get home, shower, and make myself presentable before facing the office. They got ready for bed with the strange intimacy of people still learning each other's routines. Noah borrowed a toothbrush, and Clara found herself charmed by the domesticity of it all. Two people navigating the mundane logistics of spending the night together. It felt normal and significant all at once. Lying in bed in the darkness, Clara felt Noah's arm come around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. The contact felt grounding, safe in ways she hadn't known she needed. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For not giving up when I tried to talk you out of this. For being patient with my complications. For seeing past my caution to whatever potential is underneath. He pressed a kiss to her shoulder. For making me believe I'm allowed to want this. You are allowed. We both are. Clara turned in his arms so they were face to face. Noah, I know tomorrow is going to be complicated. We're walking back into an environment where this relationship raises questions and concerns. But whatever happens, we're going to handle it together. Okay? Okay. He touched her face gently. I'm still terrified, for the record. Me too. But I'm also more sure about this than I've been about anything in years. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, the rain drumming steadily against the windows. Tomorrow would bring reality and all its demands. But tonight, in the darkness of Clara's apartment, two people who'd been alone for too long had found something neither expected but both desperately needed. Morning arrived gray and cold. Noah left early as planned, kissing Clara goodbye at her door with promises to text after his conversation with Mila. She watched him go, then stood in her now disrupted apartment, blankets still on the couch, dinner containers in the sink, the faint smell of his cologne lingering in her bedroom, and felt something shift fundamentally in her understanding of what home meant. Clara arrived at the office 15 minutes early, a habit she couldn't break even when she'd barely slept. The building was mostly empty, just security and the handful of people who kept strange hours. She rode the elevator to the 42nd floor, walked past the conference room where the holiday party had happened a lifetime ago, and closed herself in her office to prepare for what needed to happen next. At 8 o'clock sharp, she called HR and requested a meeting with the director. By 9, she was sitting across from Patricia Morrison, a woman in her 50s who'd built her career on navigating complicated interpersonal situations with tact and discretion. Clara, Patricia said, settling behind her desk with a mug of tea. What can I do for you? Clara had prepared this speech during her sleepless hours, had refined the language to be professional and direct. I need to report a relationship that has developed between myself and someone in my reporting structure. I want to proactively address any conflict of interest concerns. Patricia's expression didn't change, though Clara saw the slight tightening around her eyes. Go on. Noah Brooks and I have begun a personal relationship. He reports to Tim Hawking, who reports to me, which creates an indirect reporting relationship. I want to ensure we're handling this appropriately and within company policy. I appreciate you coming to me directly. Patricia made a note on her pad. How long has this relationship been developing? We had our first personal conversation at the holiday party 3 weeks ago. Things progressed from there, particularly over the retreat this weekend. And Brooks is aware you're having this conversation? He is. We discussed it yesterday and agreed that transparency was the best approach. Patricia was quiet for a moment, studying Clara with the assessing look of someone who'd heard every variation of workplace relationship complications. You understand this creates a difficult situation. Even with the indirect reporting structure, there's potential for perceived favoritism or conflicts of interest. I do understand, which is why I'm here. Clara kept her voice steady.
I'm prepared to recuse myself from any decisions that directly affect Noah's employment. Performance reviews, promotions, salary adjustments, anything that could be influenced by our personal relationship, I'll remove myself from the process. That's a starting point. But perception matters as much as reality in these situations. Other employees may question decisions even if you're not directly involved. Patricia leaned back in her chair. The cleanest solution would be to eliminate the reporting relationship entirely. Transfer Brooks to a different division or reassign him to report to someone outside your organizational structure. Clara had anticipated this. That's acceptable, provided it's positioned as a lateral move rather than a demotion. Noah has done excellent work, and I don't want his career advancement affected by our relationship. Of course not. Though I have to ask, are you certain this relationship is worth the professional complications? You've worked hard to get where you are, Clara. Workplace relationships, particularly with power differentials, can be career-limiting regardless of how carefully they're managed. I'm aware of the risks. Clara met Patricia's eyes directly. And yes, I'm certain it's worth it. Patricia studied her for another long moment, then nodded slowly. All right. I'll start the process of finding an appropriate reassignment for Brooks. In the meantime, I need you both to maintain absolute professional boundaries in the workplace. No displays of affection, no private meetings behind closed doors, nothing that could be construed as inappropriate. Understood. I'll also need to have a conversation with Brooks directly, make sure he understands the situation and that he's entering into this relationship of his own free will without any perception of coercion. Clara felt a flash of irritation despite knowing this was standard protocol. Noah is an adult capable of making his own decisions. I'm sure he is, but given the power dynamics, we need to document that this relationship is consensual and uncoerced. It protects both of you. Fine. When do you want to meet with him? I'll reach out to him today. And Clara? Patricia's expression softened slightly. For what it's worth, I appreciate you handling this the right way. A lot of people in your position would have tried to hide it, which only makes things worse when the truth inevitably comes out. Your transparency makes this manageable. Thank you. Clara left the HR office feeling drained but relieved. She'd done what needed to be done, had started the process of removing the professional complications. Now she just had to wait for Noah to have his conversation with Mila and hope that an 8-year-old would be more accepting of this relationship than corporate policy was. The day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Clara attended meetings, reviewed reports, made decisions about projects and budgets and strategic initiatives. But her mind kept drifting to Noah, wondering how his conversation with Mila was going, whether his daughter would be excited or upset or confused by the news that her father was dating someone. At 3 o'clock, her phone buzzed with a text from Noah. Conversation happened. Can I call you? Clara stepped out of her office and found an empty conference room. Hi, how did it go? Noah's voice carried exhaustion and relief in equal measure. Better than I expected. She asked about 8,000 questions, wanted to know if you were going to be her new mom, demanded to know if this meant she could get a dog, and made me promise that even if things didn't work out between us, you'd still be her friend. That's a lot to process. She's 8. Everything is a lot. He laughed softly. But Clara, she's genuinely happy. She said she was worried I was going to be alone forever, and that she likes you because you don't talk to her like she's a baby. Her exact words were, Clara treats me like a person, which is cool. Clara felt warmth spread through her chest. I'm glad. I was worried she might feel threatened or upset. She did ask one hard question, though. She wanted to know if me being with you meant I didn't love her mom anymore. His voice caught slightly. I told her that love doesn't work like that I'll always love her mom, and that being with you doesn't erase those feelings. It just means my heart has room for both. That's a beautiful answer. It's the truth, and she seemed to accept it. He paused. She wants to know when you can come over for dinner. Apparently she has plans to show you her rock collection and her theories about penguin aliens. I look forward to both. How's Thursday? Thursday's perfect. I'll make something more complicated than spaghetti. Maybe chicken? Mila's been requesting my famous chicken nuggets, which are just regular chicken nuggets but cut into dinosaur shapes. Sounds incredibly fancy. We're very sophisticated. His voice turned more serious. Patricia from HR called me.
We're meeting tomorrow morning to discuss the reassignment. I met with her this morning, started the process of addressing the conflict of interest.
Thank you for handling that. I know it couldn't have been a comfortable conversation. It was necessary, and honestly, I'd rather deal with corporate bureaucracy than compromise either of our positions. Clara heard voices in the hallway and lowered her voice. I should get back to work. But Noah? I'm really glad Mila's okay with this. Me too. She's the most important variable in this equation. Knowing she's on board makes everything else feel manageable. He was quiet for a moment. I'll see you tomorrow at work, where we'll maintain appropriate professional distance and definitely not think about this weekend. Definitely not. This is going to be harder than I thought. Probably, but we'll figure it out. They hung up, and Clara returned to her office feeling lighter despite the day's complications. Mila was okay with the relationship. HR was handling the reassignment. They were navigating the obstacles with honesty and communication. It wasn't perfect, but it was real and forward-moving. The rest of the week unfolded with careful choreography. At work, Clara and Noah maintained strictly professional interaction, polite acknowledgments in hallways, appropriate participation in meetings, no private conversations behind closed doors. To any observer, they were simply colleagues operating within normal workplace parameters. But underneath the surface, there was constant awareness. Clara found herself hyper-conscious of Noah's presence in meetings, the way he thought through problems, the rare moments when their eyes met and held for a fraction too long. She caught him watching her occasionally, his expression carefully neutral except for the slight curve at the corner of his mouth that suggested he was thinking about things that had nothing to do with quarterly projections. Wednesday brought news of Noah's reassignment. He'd be moving to the business development team under Richard Chen, eliminating any reporting relationship with Clara's division. It was positioned as a lateral move, recognizing his project management skills, with no change in salary or title. Patricia had handled it with her usual competence, and by Thursday morning, everyone had been informed of the organizational change. Does this mean you're not my problem anymore? Tim joked during their morning meeting. Because honestly, Brooks, you set an unreasonably high standard that makes the rest of us look bad. I'll try to be more mediocre in my new role, Noah said dryly. That's all I ask. Tim turned to Clara. Though seriously, we're going to miss having him on the team. Any chance we can negotiate custody arrangements? I think Richard has first claim now, Clara said, keeping her voice light despite the strange feeling of discussing Noah like he was a shared resource rather than the man she was falling in love with. After the meeting, she found a moment alone in the hallway with Noah while people were filing out. They stood a careful distance apart, aware that anyone could walk by at any moment. You okay with the reassignment? She asked quietly. Relieved, honestly. Richard's reputation is solid, and the business development work is actually more interesting than I expected. He glanced around to make sure they were alone. Also, it means I can do this without violating any corporate policies. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to her. Clara opened it to find a drawing clearly done by Mila, 3 stick figures labeled Dad, Clara, and Mila standing next to what was definitely meant to be a dog. At the bottom, in Mila's careful handwriting, dinner tonight at 6. Please come, from Mila. Clara felt her throat tighten. She made me an invitation. She's been working on it all week, very serious about the proper protocol for dinner guests. Noah's expression softened. She's really excited to see you again. Fair warning, she's planned the entire evening's conversation topics and may have prepared visual aids. I wouldn't expect anything less. Thursday evening found Clara standing on Noah's porch at exactly 6 o'clock, holding a bakery box of fancy cupcakes and trying to calm the nervous flutter in her stomach. This was different from the last time she'd been here. Then, it had been casual friendship, testing waters. Now it was walking into Noah's life with full awareness that she was being evaluated not just as a guest, but as a potential permanent fixture. The door flew open before she could knock, and Mila stood there wearing what appeared to be her finest dress-up clothes, a purple velvet dress with light-up shoes and a plastic tiara. You came. Dad said you would, but I was worried maybe you got lost or changed your mind or got eaten by traffic. The words tumbled out in a rush. Come in. I have so many things to show you. Mila, let her get through the door first, Noah called from somewhere inside. He appeared a moment later, wearing an apron that said, "Kiss the Cook," and looking slightly harassed. "Sorry, someone is very excited." "I can see that." Clara handed him the cupcakes. "Fair warning, these might cause sugar-induced chaos." "Worth it. Also, you look beautiful." Clara had agonized over what to wear, finally settling on jeans and a soft sweater that felt dressy enough to show she'd made effort, but casual enough not to seem like she was trying too hard. "Thank you. You look domestic." "That's my goal aesthetic." Domestic and only slightly overwhelmed. He gestured toward the kitchen. "Dinner's almost ready. Mila, why don't you show Clara your rock collection while I finish up?" For the next 20 minutes, Clara sat on the living room floor while Mila presented an exhaustive catalog of rocks collected from various locations, each with its own detailed backstory. There were beach rocks from the Oregon coast, smooth river stones from hiking trips, a chunk of quartz that was apparently very rare, and one rock that Mila insisted looked exactly like a dinosaur egg if you squinted. "This one's my favorite, though," Mila said, holding up an ordinary gray stone with a white stripe through it. "Mom found it in our backyard before she died. Dad says I should keep it somewhere safe, but I carry it sometimes when I'm nervous." Clara felt the weight of trust in that admission. "It's beautiful. And I think carrying it when you're nervous is very wise. Everyone needs something that makes them feel safe." "Do you have something like that?" Clara thought about it. "I have a watch that belonged to my brother. He died when I was younger, and wearing it makes me feel like he's still with me somehow." Mila nodded seriously. "That's good. Dead people should be remembered." She set down the rock carefully. "Can I ask you a question?" "Of course." "Are you going to be Dad's girlfriend?" Clara chose her words carefully, aware that this conversation mattered more than any business negotiation she'd ever conducted. "I'd like to be, but only if you're okay with it. Your dad and I care about each other, but you're the most important person in his life. So if you have concerns or worries, I want to hear them." "I don't have worries exactly. I just want to make sure you're not going to make him sad. He's been sad for a really long time, and lately he's been less sad, and I think maybe it's because of you." Mila looked at Clara with those serious eyes that were so like her father's. "So if you're going to be his girlfriend, you have to promise not to go away and make him sad again." The request was impossible and heartbreaking and completely understandable. "Mila, I can't promise I'll never hurt your dad, because people who care about each other sometimes hurt each other accidentally. But I can promise that I'll try my very best not to, and that if something goes wrong, it won't be because I didn't care enough." Mila considered this with the gravity of someone much older. "Okay, that's fair." She brightened suddenly. "Does this mean you can come over more? Because Dad's cooking is good but not exciting, and maybe you know how to make interesting food." Clara laughed. "I can cook a few interesting things, though your dad's chicken nuggets are apparently legendary." "They're pretty good, but they're still just chicken nuggets, even if they're shaped like dinosaurs." Dinner was exactly as chaotic and wonderful as Clara had anticipated. They ate at the scarred kitchen table, Mila providing running commentary about everything from her day at school to her theories about whether cats could be trained to use toilets to her ongoing campaign for dog ownership. "I've been doing research," she announced, pulling out a notebook covered in marker drawings. "This is my presentation on why we need a dog." "Oh no," Noah muttered. "She's been working on this all week." Mila flipped open the notebook to reveal elaborate charts and diagrams. "Dogs provide companionship, which is scientifically proven to make people happy. They encourage outdoor activity, which is healthy. They teach responsibility, which I need to learn. And most importantly, they're cute and fluffy, and I love them." "That's a compelling argument," Clara said, trying not to laugh. "Right? I even calculated the costs." Mila pointed to a chart that had numbers Clara suspected were wildly inaccurate. Food, vet visits, toys, all very affordable. "You forgot to factor in emergency medical costs, property damage from chewing, and the price of replacing everything a puppy destroys in the first year," Noah said. "Details, Dad. We can figure those out later." They spent another hour at the table, the conversation flowing easily between serious and silly. Clara found herself relaxing into the rhythm of their household, the way Noah and Mila bounced off each other with practiced ease, the obvious love that undergirded even their most absurd debates. After dinner, Mila performed an impromptu presentation on her penguin alien theory, complete with drawings and hand gestures. Then came the rock collection encore, followed by a demonstration of her recorder skills that was exactly as painful as Noah had warned. But underneath it all, Clara felt herself falling more deeply into this life, into the chaotic beauty of a family that had been broken and carefully reassembled. When Mila finally went to bed, after 3 glasses of water, 2 bathroom trips, and extensive negotiation about reading time, Noah and Clara collapsed on the couch with the exhausted satisfaction of people who'd survived an energetic 8-year-old. "She's amazing," Clara said. "She's a handful. But yeah, she's pretty amazing." Noah pulled Clara against his side, and she tucked herself into the space between his arm and chest. "Thank you for tonight. For being patient with her questions and enthusiastic about rocks and not running away screaming when she started the dog presentation." "Why would I run away? This is the most fun I've had in months." "You say that now. Wait until she really warms up to you. The questions get more invasive, the presentations more elaborate, and she'll start recruiting you to her various campaigns." "I look forward to all of it." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the house quiet except for the occasional creak of floorboards and the distant hum of traffic. Clara thought about how different this felt from her pristine apartment, how much more alive this space was despite, or maybe because of, its lived-in chaos. "Can I tell you something?" Noah said eventually. "Always. When Sarah died, I couldn't imagine ever feeling this way again. Content. Hopeful. Like maybe the future could hold something good instead of just endless management of loss." He tightened his arm around her. "You've given me that. And I know it's early and we're still figuring things out, but I need you to know how much that means." Clara turned to face him, cupping his face in her hands. "You've given me something too. Permission to want more than just professional success. Permission to believe that vulnerability isn't weakness. Permission to imagine a life that looks different from the one I'd resigned myself to." She kissed him then, slow and deep, and felt everything else fall away. The complications, the uncertainties, the hundreds of details still to be worked out. None of it mattered as much as this moment, this connection, this choice they were making to build something together despite every obstacle. When they finally broke apart, Noah rested his forehead against hers. "Stay tonight, please. I know Mila's here and we need to be careful about what she sees, but I don't want you to leave yet." "I'll stay, but I'm sleeping on the couch. We have a guest room. It's mostly storage, but there's an actual bed under the boxes." They cleared enough space in the guest room for Clara to sleep, and she borrowed one of Noah's t-shirts to sleep in. It smelled like him. Soap and something indefinably comforting, and she fell asleep in the small bed surrounded by boxes, feeling more at home than she did in her perfectly curated apartment. In the morning, she woke to the sound of small feet thundering past her door and Mila's voice announcing that Dad had to make pancakes because they had a guest, and guests deserved special breakfast. Clara smiled into her pillow, thinking that maybe this chaotic, complicated, beautifully imperfect life was exactly what she'd been looking for all along. She just hadn't known it until Noah and Mila showed her what was possible. Clara emerged from the guest room to find Noah at the stove flipping pancakes, while Mila sat at the kitchen table arranging stuffed animals in what appeared to be a complex seating chart. The morning light streaming through the windows made everything look softer, more intimate, like she'd stepped into a photograph of domestic contentment. "Morning," Noah said, glancing over his shoulder with a smile that made her stomach flip. "Coffee's ready. Fair warning, Mila's been planning your pancake toppings for the last 15 minutes. "I made a chart," Mila announced, holding up a piece of paper covered in crayon drawings. "You can have chocolate chips, blueberries, or bananas, or all 3 if you're feeling adventurous. Dad says I'm not allowed to suggest gummy bears anymore because that's not breakfast food, but I think that's discriminatory against gummy bears." Clara poured herself coffee and settled at the table. "I think chocolate chips sound perfect. And I agree about the gummy bear discrimination, but your dad probably has a point about nutrition." "That's what he always says. Nutrition this, balanced diet that, it's very boring." But Mila was grinning, clearly enjoying the morning routine. "Are you going to stay for breakfast every time you sleep over?" "Mila," Noah started, his ears going slightly red. "What?" "It's a reasonable question. If Claire's going to be Dad's girlfriend, we should know the breakfast expectations."
Clara caught Noah's eye and saw the mixture of embarrassment and amusement there. I think breakfast together sounds nice whenever I'm here, which hopefully will be fairly often, if that's okay with both of you. It's definitely okay with me, Mila said. Dad gets weird and sappy when you're around, but in a good way, less stressed out. I do not get sappy, Noah protested, sliding pancakes onto plates. You totally do. Yesterday you were humming while doing laundry. You never hum. Mrs. Chen noticed and asked if you were feeling okay. Clara laughed at Noah's expression of mortified resignation. Humming is a good sign. It's a ridiculous sign that I'm apparently losing all dignity, he said, but he was smiling as he set plates in front of them. Eat your pancakes before they get cold and stop psychoanalyzing my emotional state. They ate breakfast surrounded by the comfortable chaos of a Friday morning, Mila chattering about her plans for the weekend, Noah reminding her about homework she hadn't finished, both of them unconsciously including Clara in the conversation like she'd always been there. It felt natural in a way that should have been terrifying, but instead felt exactly right. After breakfast, Clara reluctantly prepared to leave. She had back-to-back meetings starting at 9, and she needed to go home to change into proper work clothes. Noah walked her to her car while Mila got ready for school, the morning air crisp and carrying the promise of winter. "Thank you for staying," he said, reaching for her hand. "I know it's complicated with Mila, but having you here felt important, like we're building something real instead of just stealing moments between other obligations." "It felt important to me too." Clara squeezed his fingers. "Though we should probably talk about logistics at some point. How often I stay over. What Mila sees when we tell other people beyond our immediate circle. Always thinking 3 steps ahead. It's a survival skill. But also, I want to be respectful of Mila's adjustment process. This is all new for her, and we need to make sure she feels secure even as things change." Noah pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Have I mentioned you're incredible?" "Not in the last 8 hours. Terrible oversight on my part." He kissed her properly then, slow and sweet, and Clara felt the world narrow to just this, his arms around her, the steady beat of his heart against her chest, the certainty that she'd made exactly the right choice even if it was the complicated one. The next 2 weeks unfolded with a rhythm that felt simultaneously new and familiar. At work, Noah had settled into his new role with the business development team, which meant Clara saw him less during regular office hours, but more at cross-departmental meetings, where their interaction was purely professional. They were scrupulously careful about maintaining boundaries in the office, never meeting alone behind closed doors, always keeping conversation focused on work topics when others were present. But outside the office, they were building something that felt increasingly solid. Clara spent 3 evenings a week at Noah's house, helping with dinner, listening to Mila's elaborate stories about school drama slowly becoming woven into the fabric of their daily life. Mila had taken to calling her Clara friend, which Noah explained was the highest honor his daughter bestowed on anyone, and had recruited her into various schemes including the ongoing dog campaign and a new initiative to convince Noah that bedtime should be pushed back by at least an hour. "You're supposed to be on my side," Noah said one evening when Clara had diplomatically suggested that 8:30 wasn't unreasonable for a weekend bedtime. "I'm on the side of logic and compromise," Clara replied, "which means sometimes Mila has a point." "Traitor," he muttered, but he was smiling. "I heard that," Mila called from where she was supposedly brushing her teeth. "And Clara's right. She's very smart, and you should listen to her more." "I'm creating a monster," Noah said. "2 of them, actually. They're going to team up against me for everything now." "That's the plan," Clara agreed and kissed him to soften the statement. The hardest part was navigating the curious looks and whispered questions from coworkers. The official explanation was simply that Noah had been reassigned to better utilize his project management skills. But anyone paying attention could see that something had shifted between him and Clara. They were more comfortable around each other, more likely to share small smiles across conference rooms, more obviously connected in ways that went beyond professional courtesy. Sarah Kim cornered Clara one afternoon in the break room with a knowing expression. "So, you and Brooks are officially a thing now?" "We're seeing each other, yes." "Good. It's about time you both looked happy." Sarah poured her coffee.
Though I have to say, watching you two try to maintain professional distance in meetings is entertaining. You're both terrible at hiding it. We're not trying to hide it, we're just trying to be appropriate. Right. Which is why you smile every time he talks, and he watches you like you're the most fascinating person in the room. Sarah grinned. It's actually kind of adorable, in a carefully professional, totally not obvious way. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. Is it really that obvious? To anyone paying attention, yes. But for what it's worth, I think people are happy for you. You've always been so focused on work. It's nice to see you actually enjoying something outside these walls. Sarah's expression turned more serious. Just be careful, okay? Office relationships can get messy even when everyone has the best intentions. I know. We're being as careful as we can. I believe you. Just don't lose yourself in being careful. Sometimes the best things are messy and complicated, and trying to control every variable makes you miss the actual experience. The observation stayed with Clara as she returned to her office. Sarah was right. She had a tendency to overmanage situations, to plan for every contingency until spontaneity got suffocated by structure. But with Noah and Mila, she was learning to let some things unfold naturally, to trust that not everything needed a strategic framework. That weekend brought an unexpected challenge. Mila came down with the flu, the real kind, complete with high fever, body aches, and the particular misery of a sick child who didn't understand why medicine couldn't make her feel better immediately. Noah called Clara on Saturday morning, sounding exhausted. I'm sorry, but I need to cancel tonight. Mila's temperature spiked to 103, and she's pretty miserable. I can't leave her with Mrs. Chen in this condition. Of course not. Do you need anything? I could bring soup or medicine or just be an extra set of hands. Noah was quiet for a moment. You don't have to do that. Sick kids are not fun, and this could be a long night. Which is exactly why you could use backup. I'll be there in an hour. She stopped at the store for supplies, children's fever reducer, electrolyte drinks, soup that Mila might be able to keep down, and popsicles because Clara remembered from her own childhood that frozen things helped when your throat hurt. Then she drove to Noah's house, letting herself in with the key he'd given her the week before. The house was dim and quiet. She found Noah in Mila's bedroom, sitting on the edge of her bed while she slept fitfully. He looked up when Clara appeared in the doorway, surprise and relief crossing his face. You actually came, he said quietly. Of course I came. Clara set down her bags and moved to feel Mila's forehead. The girl was burning up, her small face flushed with fever. When did you last give her medicine? About 3 hours ago. I can give her more in 1 hour. Okay, why don't you go take a shower, get some food, do something that isn't sitting here worrying. I'll stay with her. Clara, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. Go. She took his place on the bed, and after a moment's hesitation, Noah left. Clara sat with Mila, monitoring her breathing, occasionally wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. The girl stirred occasionally, murmuring things that didn't quite make sense, and Clara found herself humming softly without thinking about it, some half-remembered lullaby from her own childhood. When Mila's eyes fluttered open, they were glassy with fever, but focused enough to recognize Clara. You're here. I'm here. How are you feeling? Terrible. Everything hurts and I'm cold but also hot, and nothing makes sense. Her voice was hoarse and small. Is Dad okay? He's fine, just taking a quick break. He's been taking care of you all night. He does that, takes care of everyone else and forgets about himself. Mila's eyes started to drift closed again. I'm glad you're here. He needs someone to take care of him too. The simple observation hit Clara with unexpected force. This 8-year-old had spent 3 years watching her father sacrifice everything for her well-being, and somewhere along the way had started worrying about whether anyone was taking care of him. It was too much awareness for someone so young, too much responsibility carried on small shoulders. I'm going to make sure he's okay, Clara promised quietly. That's part of why I'm here. Good. Mila's hand found Clara's and held on. You're nice. I'm glad Dad picked you. Clara sat there holding Mila's hand until the girl fell back asleep, feeling the weight of trust that had been placed in her. This wasn't just about her relationship with Noah anymore. It was about becoming part of something larger, a family that had been fractured and carefully rebuilt, now making space for her to be woven into its fabric. Noah returned 20 minutes later looking more human, though still exhausted. He stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene, Clara sitting on Mila's bed, holding his daughter's hand, humming softly in the dim room. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for being here, for understanding that this is part of the package. This is exactly where I want to be." They traded off throughout the day and into the evening, one of them always with Mila, while the other took breaks or handled practical necessities like laundry and food. Clara had never taken care of a sick child before, had never experienced the particular anxiety of watching a fever that wouldn't break or the relief when it finally started to come down. But she found herself falling into the rhythm of it, learning to read Mila's needs, understanding when she wanted company and when she needed quiet. By Sunday evening, Mila's fever had finally broken. She was weak and pale, but asking for food, which Noah said was a good sign. They made her toast and weak tea, and she managed to keep it down while watching cartoons from her nest of blankets on the couch. "I missed the whole weekend," she said mournfully. "I was supposed to go to Emma's birthday party, and now she probably thinks I don't like her." "We'll explain that you were sick," Noah assured her. "Emma will understand." "But I missed cake. There was going to be chocolate cake with buttercream frosting." "Tragedy," Clara said solemnly, "though I happen to know your dad makes excellent chocolate cake. Maybe we could make one this week, once you're feeling better?" Mila perked up slightly. "Really? Really? Consider it a recovery celebration." After Mila went back to bed, Clara and Noah collapsed on the couch in the living room. They were both exhausted, slightly sweaty from the overheated house, and Clara was pretty sure she had cracker crumbs in her hair from when Mila had used her as a pillow while eating. It was unglamorous and decidedly unromantic, and she couldn't remember the last time she'd felt so content. "I'm sorry your weekend got hijacked by sick kid duty," Noah said, pulling her against his side. "Don't apologize. This is real life. I'd rather be here helping than sitting in my apartment pretending everything is always perfect. Still, not exactly the exciting relationship experience I promised." Clara turned to look at him. "Noah, I don't want exciting. I want real. I want to be the person who shows up when things are hard, not just when they're fun. That's what partnership looks like." His eyes searched her face, and she saw something shift in his expression, a deepening of trust, a letting go of the last bits of guardedness. "I'm falling in love with you, completely, terrifyingly, irrevocably in love with you." Clara's breath caught. They hadn't said those words yet, had been circling around them for weeks without quite landing. Hearing them now in this unglamorous moment of exhaustion and cracker crumbs felt exactly right. "I'm falling in love with you too," she said. "With you and with Mila and with this life you've built. All of it." He kissed her then, slow and deep and full of promise. And Clara thought that this messy, complicated, beautifully imperfect reality was worth every professional complication, every whispered question, every moment of uncertainty. The following week brought an unexpected obstacle. Claire was called into a meeting with the CEO and several board members to discuss a major restructuring proposal. As VP of Operations, her input was critical, but the meeting ran long and intense, with competing visions for the company's direction clashing against budget realities and market pressures. By the time she emerged 4 hours later, she had 17 missed calls and twice as many texts. Most were work-related, but 3 were from Noah, each one progressively more concerned. She called him back immediately. "Sorry, I was in a meeting that wouldn't end. What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong exactly, but Mila's school called. Apparently there was an incident on the playground, and they need a parent to come in. I'm in the middle of a client presentation that I can't leave, and my sister's in Tacoma today." He sounded frustrated and stressed. "I'm trying to figure out if I can get Mrs. Chen to go, but she doesn't drive, and—" "I'll go," Clara said without thinking. "What?" "I'll go to the school. I can be there in 20 minutes. "Clara, you don't have to do that. I can figure something out." "Noah, I want to help. What school? And what do they need?" He gave her the details with obvious reluctance, clearly uncomfortable with asking this of her. But Clara was already grabbing her jacket and heading for the elevator. She'd spent the last month becoming part of Mila's life. This was just the next step in that integration. The elementary school was a low brick building surrounded by portable classrooms and a playground with brightly colored equipment. Clara checked in at the office, explaining she was there on behalf of Noah Brooks, and was directed to the nurse's station. She found Mila sitting on a plastic chair with an ice pack pressed to her elbow, looking small and miserable. Her eyes widened when she saw Clara. "Clara, where's Dad?" "He's stuck in a work meeting, so he asked me to come." Clara knelt down to be eye level with her. "What happened?" "I fell off the monkey bars. It's so stupid. I've done those bars a million times, but I got distracted and slipped, and now my elbow hurts and I feel dumb." Tears started sliding down her cheeks. "I wanted Dad." Clara felt her heart crack. "I know you did. And he wanted to be here, but sometimes work gets in the way. But I'm here, and I'm going to take care of you until he can get free. Okay?" The school nurse appeared with a clipboard and a sympathetic expression. "You must be Ms. Whitman. I'm Janice. Mila took a pretty good fall, but I don't think anything's broken. The elbow's swollen and she's got some scrapes, but it's mostly bruised pride at this point. Can I take her home?" "If you're authorized to pick her up, yes. I just need you to sign some paperwork." Clara handled the administrative details while keeping one eye on Mila, who was still crying quietly. Once they were cleared to leave, she guided the girl out to her car and got her settled in the back seat with her injured arm carefully supported. "Where are we going?" Mila asked as Clara started driving. "Your house. I figured you'd be more comfortable there than at my apartment. Do you know where the first aid stuff is? Your dad showed me last week, remember, when you scraped your knee on the sidewalk." "Oh yeah." Mila was quiet for a moment. "Clara, I'm sorry I cried about wanting Dad." "I didn't mean you weren't good enough." Clara glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Mila's worried expression. "Hey, you have nothing to apologize for. It's completely normal to want your parent when you're hurt or scared. I'm just glad I could be here to help." They got to the house and Clara settled Mila on the couch with pillows, ice, and the pain reliever the nurse had recommended. Then she made hot chocolate because that seemed like the kind of thing that helped with trauma, and sat with Mila while she sipped it slowly. "This is the second time you've taken care of me when I felt awful," Mila observed. "First when I was sick, now this. That's what people do when they care about each other. They show up." "Is that what love is? Showing up?" Clara thought about the question, about all the ways she'd tried to define love over the years. "I think it's a big part of it. Love is choosing to be there even when it's inconvenient or hard. It's caring about someone else's well-being as much as your own." "Do you love Dad?" The question was so direct, so quintessentially Mila, that Clara couldn't help but smile. "Yes, I do." "Good, because he loves you too. I can tell by the way he looks at you, like you're the best thing he's seen in forever." Mila set down her hot chocolate carefully. "Can I ask you something kind of serious?" "Of course." "Are you going to stay? Like, actually stay and not leave like Mom did?" Her voice was small and uncertain. "I know Mom didn't mean to leave, but she did, and now I worry that people I love are just going to disappear." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. This was the real question beneath all of Mila's easy acceptance, the fear she'd been carrying without voicing. Not whether Clara was nice or fun or good for her dad, but whether she could be trusted not to disappear. "Mila, I can't promise nothing bad will ever happen. Your mom's death taught you that life doesn't always work the way we want it to." Clara chose her words carefully, knowing this conversation mattered more than any she'd had in her professional life. "But I can promise that I'm choosing to be here, that I love you and your dad, and that I'm committed to being part of your lives for as long as you'll have me. I'm not planning to leave, and if something ever changes, we'll talk about it honestly. You'll never wake up one day to find me just gone." Mila studied her face with those serious eyes, processing the answer. Then she nodded slowly. "Okay, I believe you. Thank you for trusting me with that." "You're welcome." Mila leaned against Clara's side, careful of her injured arm. "Also, can we watch cartoons now? My brain is tired from serious conversations." They were halfway through an episode of something involving anthropomorphic vegetables when Noah burst through the door looking panicked. "Mila, are you okay?" "I'm fine, Dad. Just bruised." Mila waved her good arm. "Clara picked me up and made hot chocolate and told me she loves you, which I already knew, but it's nice to have confirmation." Noah's eyes shot to Clara, surprise and warmth and something deeper flashing across his face. She did she? Yep. Also, we had a serious conversation about love and staying and promises. It was very grown up. Mila returned her attention to the TV. Now we're watching Captain Carrot save the world from evil broccoli. You can join if you want. Noah crossed to the couch and sat on Mila's other side, taking her injured arm gently to examine it. The nurse said it's not broken? Just bruised and embarrassed. Mila made a face. I fell off the monkey bars like an amateur. Amateur, he corrected automatically. And it happens to everyone. I'm just glad you're okay. He looked at Clara over Mila's head. Thank you for picking her up. I couldn't get free and I was starting to panic. I'm glad I could help. Though she's right, we did have a very serious conversation. I'll tell you about it later. They spent the rest of the afternoon in comfortable domesticity, watching cartoons, making an early dinner that Mila could eat one-handed, generally keeping her entertained and comfortable. After Mila went to bed, Noah and Clara finally had a moment alone in the kitchen. So, he said, pulling her close, you told my daughter you love me. I did. She asked a direct question and I gave an honest answer. And you told her you're not planning to leave. Also true. Clara wrapped her arms around his waist. She needed to hear it, Noah. She's been carrying this fear that everyone she loves disappears, and she needed someone to acknowledge that fear and promise to fight against it. You're incredible. Have I mentioned that recently? Not in the last few hours. He kissed her, and Clara felt everything else fall away. This was what mattered, this connection, this commitment, this choice they were making every day to build something together. I love you, Noah said when they broke apart. Completely, terrifyingly, with every part of me that's capable of loving. You've taken my carefully managed life and turned it into something actually worth living. I love you too. You and Mila and this beautiful mess you've created here. They stood in the kitchen holding each other, and Clara thought about how much her life had changed in just 2 months. How she'd gone from careful isolation to being woven into the fabric of a family. How she'd learned that love wasn't about perfection or control, but about showing up even when things were hard. The next several weeks brought a rhythm that felt increasingly natural. Clara spent most nights at Noah's house, keeping spare clothes in the guest room that had become functionally hers. They fell into patterns of shared responsibility. She helped with dinner and homework. He made sure her coffee was ready in the morning. They tag-teamed the logistics of Mila's schedule and activities. It felt like playing house, except it wasn't playing. It was real life with all its mundane complications and unexpected joys. At work, people had stopped even pretending not to notice their relationship. The official stance was that appropriate protocols had been followed and there was no conflict of interest. But the unofficial reality was that everyone knew VP of Operations Clara Whitman and Business Development Project Manager Noah Brooks were together. Most people seemed genuinely happy about it, though Clara occasionally caught whispers in hallways that stopped when she approached. Let them talk, Sarah said when Clara mentioned it one day. You're both doing your jobs well, you followed the rules, and you're clearly happy. Anyone who has a problem with it is just bitter or bored. The real test came in early February when Dynamics Corp made Noah a formal offer. The position was exactly what he'd walked away from 3 years ago. Senior project management, significant salary increase, leadership responsibilities. It was everything his old career had promised before loss had forced him to recalibrate his priorities. He told Clara about it one evening after Mila had gone to bed, his expression torn between temptation and uncertainty. I wasn't going to consider it, he said, pacing her living room where she'd insisted they have this conversation without small ears listening. But Clara, it's a lot of money. Enough that I could afford better schools for Mila, save for her college, stop worrying about one emergency wiping out everything I've built. But, Clara prompted, but it's also 60-hour weeks, frequent travel, and all the stress I left behind. I'd be sacrificing time with Mila exactly when she needs me most. And with you, he stopped, running his hand through his hair. We're finally building something real. Adding that kind of job pressure would break it before we've had a chance to see what it could become. Clara stood and moved to him, taking his restless hands in hers. Noah, you need to make this decision based on what's right for you and Mila, not on what you think I need or want. But you're part of the equation now. Your needs matter. Then here's what I need. She made him look at her. I need you to choose what makes you happy, not what looks impressive on paper. I need you to prioritize Mila's well-being and your own mental health over salary numbers. And I need you to trust that we can build something strong enough to weather whatever career you choose as long as you're making that choice authentically. You're telling me to turn it down. I'm telling you to do what feels right. If that means taking the job, we'll figure out how to make it work. If it means staying where you are, that's okay too. Just don't sacrifice yourself for anyone else's expectations, including mine. Noah pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. I don't want the job. I thought I did. Thought maybe I could recapture something I lost. But the truth is, I don't want to be that person anymore. I want to be someone who's present for his daughter, who has time for the woman he loves, who doesn't measure success solely by professional achievement. Then don't take it. It's that simple. It's that simple. Clara pulled back enough to see his face. You get to choose what success looks like for you. And if that means a less prestigious job that allows you to actually live your life, then that's the successful choice. He kissed her, and in that kiss Clara felt gratitude and relief and love that had been tested and chosen to stay. When they broke apart, Noah was smiling with something like peace. I'm going to turn it down, he said. And I'm going to stop feeling guilty about choosing happiness over ambition. Good, because ambition is overrated anyway, says the VP who's probably going to be CEO someday. Clara laughed. That's different. I genuinely like my job. You were doing yours out of obligation. Fair point. He pulled her back to the couch, settling her against his side. Thank you for not making this complicated, for understanding that sometimes the right choice is the one that looks like settling. You're not settling. You're choosing deliberately. There's a difference. They sat in comfortable silence, and Clara thought about choices and timing and the particular grace of finding someone who understood that success came in many forms. She'd spent years pursuing one narrow definition of achievement, and it had left her accomplished but lonely. Noah had learned the hard way that some things mattered more than career advancement. Together, they were building something that valued presence over prestige, connection over conquest, love over ambition. It wasn't what either of them had planned, but it was exactly what they both needed. I love you, Noah said into the quiet. I love you too. And in Clara's pristine apartment that was slowly accumulating signs of actual life, Mila's drawings on the refrigerator, Noah's jacket on the coat rack, shoes by the door that weren't hers, those words felt like the truest thing either of them had ever said. Spring arrived in Seattle with the kind of cautious optimism that characterized everything about the city. Rain interspersed with unexpected sunshine, cherry blossoms blooming despite the lingering cold. Clara stood at her office window watching the skyline emerge from morning fog and realized with a start that 4 months had passed since that first conversation on the balcony. 4 months since her carefully controlled life had been turned completely upside down. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mila, who had recently been granted limited texting privileges and used them with enthusiastic abandon. The message was a photo of a golden retriever puppy with the caption, "Look, Dad says we can talk about it." Clara smiled and typed back, "That's progress. Keep working on him." The dog campaign had reached fever pitch in recent weeks. Mila had enlisted Clara as a co-conspirator, and together they'd been systematically dismantling Noah's objections with facts, charts, and increasingly elaborate emotional appeals. He was weakening. Clara could see it in the way he paused longer before saying no, and how he'd started asking practical questions about breeds and training instead of just dismissing the idea entirely. A knock on her door pulled her attention away from the window. Marcus entered carrying 2 coffee cups and wearing his serious expression, which meant actual conversation rather than his usual irreverent commentary. "Got a minute?" he asked, handing her one of the coffees. "For you?" "Always." He settled into the chair across from her desk and studied her with an assessing look that made Clara slightly uncomfortable. "You look different." "Different how?" "Happy. Actually, genuinely happy in a way I haven't seen in the 3 years I've known you." He smiled. "It's unsettling, but also nice. Brooks is good for you." "He is. They both are."
Clara sipped her coffee. Though I'm guessing you didn't come here just to comment on my emotional state. Perceptive, as always. Marcus's expression turned more serious. I wanted to give you a heads up. The board is meeting next week to discuss succession planning. Specifically, who's being groomed for CEO when Davidson retires in 2 years. Clara felt her stomach tighten. She'd known this conversation was coming, had been preparing for it her entire career. The VP of Operations was the logical choice for the next CEO, and she'd positioned herself perfectly for the role. Except now, the idea of taking on that level of responsibility felt less like achievement and more like sacrifice. And, she prompted, and your name is at the top of the list, but there are concerns about whether you're still as committed as you were 6 months ago. Marcus held up a hand before she could interrupt. I'm not saying the concerns are valid. I'm just telling you they exist. Some board members have noticed you're leaving at reasonable hours now, spending less time in the office on weekends, generally appearing to have an actual life outside of work. That's a bad thing? To some people, yes. They equate constant presence with dedication, and your newfound work-life balance is being interpreted as reduced ambition. Clara felt anger rise in her chest. That's absurd. My performance hasn't changed. I'm still delivering results, meeting objectives, exceeding expectations. The only difference is I'm not sacrificing my personal life to do it. I know, and for what it's worth, I've been arguing that having a life actually makes you a better leader. But there's an old guard on the board that still thinks CEOs should be married to the job above all else. Marcus paused. So I wanted you to know what you're walking into. If you want that CEO position, you're going to have to fight for it differently than you expected. After Marcus left, Clara sat at her desk staring at nothing, her mind racing. She'd worked toward this goal for over a decade. VP of Operations was supposed to be a stepping stone, not a destination. But the thought of what becoming CEO would require, the hours, the travel, the constant availability, the sacrifice of everything she'd built with Noah and Mila, made her feel physically ill. She pulled out her phone and texted Noah. Can we talk tonight? After Mila's asleep? His response came quickly. Of course. Everything okay? Just need your perspective on something. Nothing bad. I'll put extra effort into bedtime. See you tonight. The day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Clara went through the motions of meetings and decisions, but her mind kept circling back to the same question. What did she actually want? Not what she was supposed to want, not what she'd spent years working toward, but what would make her genuinely happy. By the time she arrived at Noah's house that evening, she felt wrung out from internal debate. Mila greeted her at the door with her usual enthusiasm, chattering about a science project involving vinegar and baking soda that had apparently exceeded expectations and created a mess that took 3 adults to clean up. Mrs. Patterson said I have enthusiastic experimental energy, which I think means I use too much baking soda, but she's being polite about it, Mila explained over dinner. But the volcano was really good, way better than Tommy's, and his dad is an actual scientist, so that's saying something. Actual scientist, Noah corrected. That's what I said. After dinner, they did homework together at the kitchen table, Mila working on math problems while Clara helped Noah plan the logistics for a camping trip he was organizing for Mila's class. It was mundane and domestic and exactly the kind of evening Clara had never imagined wanting. Yet sitting there, surrounded by the comfortable chaos of life with Noah and Mila, she felt more content than she ever had in her pristine apartment with her impressive title and her carefully constructed success. Bedtime was the usual negotiation, with Mila employing increasingly creative delay tactics, until Noah finally put his foot down with gentle firmness. Once she was settled, he joined Clara on the back deck where she'd gone to process her thoughts, in the cool evening air. Okay, he said, sitting beside her and taking her hand. What's going on? You've been somewhere else all evening. Clara took a breath and told him about the conversation with Marcus, about the CEO succession planning, about the implicit expectation that achieving that level meant sacrificing the life she'd built over the past 4 months. The thing is, she said, staring out at the darkening yard, 6 months ago, I would have done whatever it took to get that position. I would have worked whatever hours, made whatever sacrifices, proven I was the most dedicated candidate. But now, she turned to look at him. Now I'm not sure I want it.
Not if it means going back to the person I was before. Not if it costs me this. Noah was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. Can I tell you what I see? Please. I see someone who's finally figured out that success isn't measured solely by titles and corner offices. Someone who's learned that having a life you actually want to live is more valuable than having a life that looks impressive on paper. He paused. But I also see someone who's fought really hard to get where she is, and I don't want you to throw that away because you're afraid of what choosing ambition means for us. I'm not afraid of what it means for us. I'm afraid of what it means for me, of becoming so consumed by work that I lose sight of everything else that matters. Then don't let that happen. You're Clara Whitman. You're capable of setting boundaries and maintaining them. If you want to be CEO, be CEO. But do it on your terms, not theirs. Clara felt something loosen in her chest. You're saying I don't have to choose between career and relationship. I'm saying that false binary is exactly the kind of thing that keeps women from achieving their potential while men are expected to have both. His voice was firm. You can be an excellent CEO and an excellent partner. Those things aren't mutually exclusive unless you accept the premise that they are. The board thinks they are. Then change the board's mind. Show them what modern leadership actually looks like. Someone who's present and effective, who models healthy boundaries, who proves that having a life makes you better at your job rather than worse. He turned to face her fully. Clara, I fell in love with your ambition as much as anything else. Don't diminish that part of yourself because you're worried about balance. We'll figure out the balance together. She kissed him then, overwhelmed by gratitude and love and the particular gift of being with someone who wanted her to be fully herself, rather than a diminished version for his comfort. What did I do to deserve you? She asked when they broke apart. You showed up at a corporate holiday party looking terrified and gorgeous, and you were honest when everyone else was performing. He smiled. Also, you're really good at marshmallows. That's what sealed the deal? Marshmallow competence? Among other things. They sat together in the cooling evening air, and Clara felt certainty settle into her bones. She wanted the CEO position. Not because she was supposed to want it, but because she'd be genuinely good at it, and because giving it up would mean letting other people's limited vision define her potential. But she'd pursue it differently than she would have 6 months ago. With boundaries, with balance, with the understanding that achievement meant nothing if it cost her the people and experiences that made life worth living. The next morning, Clara requested a meeting with the board chair. Theodore Davidson was a man in his late 60s who'd been CEO for the past 12 years and was known for his traditional views on leadership and dedication. She'd always respected him professionally while privately disagreeing with his work-life philosophy. Clara, he said, gesturing her into his office, Marcus mentioned you might want to discuss the succession planning. I'm glad you're taking the initiative. I wanted to address some concerns I understand have been raised about my commitment to the CEO track. Davidson had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. You understand these conversations are preliminary. No decisions have been made. Of course, but I also understand that my recent work-life balance adjustments have been interpreted as reduced ambition, and I want to correct that misperception directly. She spent the next 30 minutes laying out her vision for modern leadership. Data on productivity and innovation showing that leaders with healthy boundaries made better decisions. Examples of successful CEOs who modeled work-life integration. Research on how diverse leadership styles improved company performance. She was prepared, articulate, and absolutely convinced of her argument. I'm not interested in being CEO if it requires me to sacrifice my personal life, she concluded. But I'm also not interested in accepting the premise that those two things are mutually exclusive. I believe I can be an excellent CEO precisely because I have a life outside these walls that gives me perspective and keeps me grounded. Davidson studied her with an expression she couldn't quite read. You've changed in the past few months, Clara. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a concerning one. With respect, sir, I think that depends on what kind of CEO you want. If you want someone who will work 80-hour weeks and make the company their entire identity, I'm not your candidate. But if you want someone who's strategic, effective, and capable of modeling the kind of sustainable leadership that attracts and retains top talent, then I'm exactly who you need. That's quite the pitch. It's the truth. He was quiet for a long moment, I'll take your perspective under consideration. But Clara, you should know that changing the board's culture won't happen overnight. You'll face resistance. I'm aware. But I'm also willing to fight for it. She stood to leave. Thank you for your time, sir. Walking back to her office, Clara felt a mixture of anxiety and exhilaration. She'd laid her cards on the table, made her position clear. Now she just had to trust that competence and conviction would matter more than conformity to outdated expectations. The weeks that followed brought unexpected developments. Clara learned that she wasn't the only one chafing against traditional leadership expectations. Several other executives, including Marcus, had been quietly advocating for more flexible approaches to senior roles. What she thought was an isolated issue turned out to be part of a larger conversation about what modern leadership should look like. The board meeting in early April became a referendum on that conversation. Clara wasn't present for the discussions, but Marcus gave her a blow-by-blow account afterward over celebratory drinks. You started a revolution, he said, raising his glass. Davidson presented your argument along with supporting data from other companies, and half the board lit up like someone had finally given them permission to question the old model. By the end of the meeting, they'd agreed to revise the CEO expectations to emphasize results over hours, strategic thinking over constant availability. And my candidacy? You're still at the top of the list, but now it's because of your perspective rather than in spite of it. Marcus grinned. Congratulations, you've successfully disrupted corporate culture. That's worth at least 2 drinks. Clara felt relief wash through her. She'd risked everything on the belief that authenticity mattered more than performance, and it had worked. Not because she'd gotten lucky, but because she'd been willing to advocate for what she knew was right. That evening, she shared the news with Noah and Mila over the dinner they'd started calling Friday Family Night, a tradition that had emerged organically and now felt essential to all 3 of them. So, you're going to be super important? Mila asked, trying to wrap her head around the concept of CEO. I'm already super important, Clara said with mock seriousness. I'll just have a fancier title. Will you have to work all the time? No more than I do now. That was part of the deal. I get to keep being present for the people I care about. Mila nodded, satisfied with this answer. Good. Because we need you for the dog campaign. Dad's almost broken, but he needs one more push. I haven't almost broken, Noah protested. I'm simply considering the arguments. That's what almost broken looks like, Clara and Mila said in unison, then dissolved into laughter. After dinner, while Mila was occupied with a video call to her cousin, Noah pulled Clara aside with an expression that was equal parts nervous and determined. Can we talk? Actually talk about something important? Clara felt her heartbeat quicken. Of course. He led her out to the back deck, which had become their designated spot for serious conversations. The evening was unseasonably warm, the kind of spring night that promised summer was coming. I've been thinking about something for a while now, Noah began, his hands shoved in his pockets in a gesture Clara recognized as nervousness. About what we're building here and what I want our future to look like. Okay, Clara said carefully. When Sarah died, I couldn't imagine ever being with anyone else. Not because no one could measure up to her, but because I didn't think I had it in me to be vulnerable like that again. To trust someone with my heart and Mila's heart and risk everything falling apart. He pulled his hands from his pockets and took both of hers. But then you showed up with your executive armor and your direct questions, and somehow you made me believe that loving again wasn't betraying what I had before. It was honoring it by proving I still had the capacity for connection. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. Noah, let me finish, please. I need to say this right. He took a shaky breath. You've become part of our family in ways I never expected. Mila adores you. Mrs. Chen constantly tells me I'd be an idiot to let you go, and I wake up every morning grateful that you chose us despite all our complications. He released one of her hands to pull something from his pocket. So I wanted to ask if you'd be willing to make this official. He opened a small velvet box to reveal a ring, not ostentatious or flashy, just a simple band with a single stone that caught the light beautifully. Clara's breath caught. I know it's only been 4 months, Noah continued, words tumbling out faster now. And I know we're both practical people who understand that marriage is complicated and merging lives is messy, and there are hundreds of logistical details to work out. But Clara, I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life with you.
I want to make you breakfast and listen to your work stories and watch you teach Mila how to be a fierce, independent woman. I want to be the person you come home to, the one who reminds you to prioritize happiness over perfection, the one who knows exactly how you take your coffee." He paused. "So Clara Whitman, will you marry me?" Clara looked at the ring, at Noah's anxious, hopeful expression, at the life they'd built together in this house that had become as much hers as his. 4 months ago, she would have said this was too fast, too impractical, too risky. But 4 months ago, she'd been a different person, someone who prioritized caution over connection, safety over vulnerability. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "Yes, I'll marry you." Noah's face transformed with relief and joy. He slid the ring onto her finger with hands that shook slightly, then pulled her into a kiss that tasted like promise and future and everything they'd been building toward since that first conversation on a balcony. When they broke apart, they found Mila standing in the doorway trying very hard to look like she hadn't been spying. "I wasn't watching," she announced. "But if I had been watching, I would ask if this means Clara's going to live here forever, and also if we can please get a dog to celebrate." Noah laughed, the sound carrying pure happiness. "Come here, troublemaker." Mila ran to them, and they pulled her into a group hug. Standing there with Noah's arms around her and Mila squeezed between them, Clara felt something fundamental click into place. This was family, not the one she'd imagined when she was building her careful career, but something better and messier and more real. "Does this mean I can call you something other than Clara, friend?" Mila asked, her voice muffled against Clara's shoulder. "What did you have in mind?" "I don't know. I was thinking maybe Clara Mom. But that's weird because you're not my actual mom and I don't want to forget her." Mila pulled back to look at them both. "Is it okay to have two moms? One who I remember through stories and pictures, and one who's actually here?" Clara felt her throat tighten with emotion. "I think that's more than okay. Your mom will always be your mom. No one can replace her. But if you want to call me Mom or Clara Mom or anything else, I'd be honored." "Okay, I'll try it out and see what feels right." Mila brightened. "But seriously, can we get a dog now? This is the perfect time for a dog. We're an official family, and families have dogs." Noah looked at Clara with an expression of amused resignation. "We're going to lose this battle, aren't we?" "Absolutely. We've been doomed from the start." 2 weeks later, they brought home a golden retriever puppy that Mila named Professor Snuggles, though the dog showed no signs of academic inclination and mostly excelled at destroying shoes and having accidents in inconvenient locations. The house descended into chaos for several weeks while they established training routines and learned to navigate life with an energetic puppy. Clara moved in officially the following month, merging her precisely organized belongings with the comfortable disorder of Noah and Mila's household. Her minimalist aesthetic clashed wonderfully with their lived-in warmth. And somehow, the combination worked, creating spaces that were both beautiful and functional, sophisticated and welcoming. The wedding happened in late June in Noah's backyard, which they'd spent weeks transforming into something magical with string lights and flowers and borrowed chairs from what felt like half the neighborhood. It was small and intimate, just family, close friends, and a handful of colleagues including Marcus, Sarah, and a surprisingly emotional Tim. Mila served as both flower girl and junior officiant, having insisted on contributing to the ceremony with a speech about what makes a family. Standing in her fancy dress that she'd picked out herself, she addressed the gathered guests with the seriousness of someone much older. "When my mom died, I thought our family was broken," she said, her voice clear and steady. "And for a long time it kind of was. Dad was sad, I was sad, and we were just trying to get through every day without falling apart." She looked at Noah and Clara. But then Clara showed up, and she didn't try to fix everything or make us not sad anymore. She just showed up and kept showing up, even when things were hard. And slowly, our family stopped being broken and started being something new. She paused, and Clara saw tears streaming down Noah's face, saw Mrs. Chen dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, saw Marcus trying very hard to maintain his cynical composure and failing completely. "I learned that families can have different shapes," Mila continued. "That you can love people who aren't here anymore and also love new people who show up. That getting bigger doesn't mean replacing what you had before.
It just means your heart gets bigger too. She smiled at Clara. So today, our family is officially getting Clara. And also Professor Snuggles, who's part of the family even though he ate my homework twice, and Dad still hasn't forgiven him. Laughter rippled through the crowd. The ceremony continued with traditional vows, with tears and smiles, and the particular sweetness of two people choosing each other with full awareness of what that choice meant. When the officiant pronounced them married, the gathered friends and family erupted in applause, and Professor Snuggles howled enthusiastically from where Mrs. Chen was restraining him. The reception was exactly as chaotic and wonderful as Clara had hoped. Good food, better company, and dancing that lasted well into the evening. She danced with Noah, with Mila, with Marcus, who declared her officially insane for willingly joining their corporate circus, and with her father, who told her he'd never seen her look so genuinely happy. As the evening wound down and guests started departing, Clara found herself standing in the same spot on the deck where Noah had proposed, watching the remnants of the party being cleaned up by people who'd insisted they didn't need to but had helped anyway. Noah joined her, loosening his tie and pulling her close. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Brooks?" Clara had decided to keep her name professionally but take his name personally, a compromise that felt right for someone straddling the line between executive leadership and family life. "I'm feeling like the luckiest person alive." That's my line. We can both be lucky. They stood together in the warm June evening, and Clara thought about the journey that had brought them here. About the holiday party where she'd felt lonely in a room full of people. About the balcony conversation that had started everything. About the retreat where they'd finally given in to what had been building between them. About sick kids and school pickups and Friday family nights that had become the scaffolding of actual life. She thought about the board meeting where she'd been officially named CEO designate, with a start date planned for 18 months out to allow for proper transition planning. About the uncomfortable conversations with colleagues who didn't understand her choices, and the supportive ones with people who saw in her example permission to pursue their own version of integrated success. But mostly, she thought about this. Standing in a backyard with string lights and scattered flower petals, held by a man who'd taught her that vulnerability was strength, and that showing up mattered more than perfection, in a life that was messy and complicated and exactly what she'd been missing. "Clara?" Mila's voice called from the doorway. "Can you come help me get Professor Snuggles to stop eating the leftover cake? Dad says you're better at firm but loving discipline." "That's a very specific skill set," Clara said, but she was already heading inside. "It's your superpower," Noah said, following her. "Among others." Inside, they found the puppy had indeed discovered the remains of the wedding cake and was enthusiastically destroying what was left, while Mrs. Chen provided ineffective commentary about young animals and their lack of manners. Clara rescued what could be saved, redirected Professor Snuggles to appropriate activities, and helped Mila prepare for bed despite the late hour and sugar-fueled energy. Later, lying in bed in the master bedroom that was now officially theirs together, Clara felt Noah's arm come around her waist in the gesture that had become as familiar as breathing. "Thank you," he said quietly into the darkness. "For what?" "For taking a chance on this. On us. On building something that probably looked impossible from the outside." Clara turned in his arms to face him. "It wasn't impossible. It just required being willing to redefine what success looked like. To understand that having it all doesn't mean achieving everything on some prescribed list, but rather building a life that feels authentic and full and worth living." Very philosophical for someone who's been married less than 12 hours. "I contain multitudes." He kissed her, and in that kiss, Clara felt everything they'd built and everything they'd continue building. The life that wasn't perfect, but was real, that challenged her and comforted her in equal measure, that had room for ambition and love, and everything in between. In the months and years that followed, they'd face new challenges, the demands of Clara's CEO role, Mila's adolescence with all its complications, the ongoing negotiation of blended families and merged lives. They'd have fights about work-life balance and parenting decisions, and whose turn it was to deal with whatever Professor Snuggles had destroyed. They'd have moments of doubt and exhaustion and wondering if they'd taken on too much. But they'd also have Friday family nights and morning coffee on the deck, and the particular sweetness of watching Mila grow up, surrounded by love that came in multiple forms. They'd have the pride of building careers that mattered without sacrificing the relationships that made those careers worthwhile. They'd have each other, choosing every day to show up even when things were hard. And lying there in the darkness of their bedroom, listening to Noah's steady breathing and the faint sound of Professor Snuggles snoring from his bed in the hallway, Clara understood something fundamental about happiness. It wasn't about having a perfect life or achieving every goal on some imagined checklist. It was about finding people who made the imperfect life worth living, who saw you completely and chose you anyway, who understood that love was spelled Time and showed up to prove it. She'd spent years building walls around herself, convinced that safety lay in isolation and control. But Noah and Mila had shown her that real safety came from connection, from being known and loved despite your flaws, from building something together that was stronger than what either person could create alone. Clara Whitman, soon-to-be CEO, currently wife, perpetually evolving human, fell asleep that night with a smile on her face and her hand clasped in Noah's. Outside, the Seattle night carried on with its usual rhythms of traffic and rain and city sounds. Inside, in a small house in Ballard that held more love than its square footage should allow, a family that had been carefully rebuilt and joyfully expanded rested. The future would bring its own challenges and triumphs, its own moments of doubt and celebration. But whatever came, they'd face it together, messily, imperfectly, and with the absolute certainty that choosing each other had been the bravest and best decision any of them had ever made. And in the morning, when Mila burst into their room at an unreasonably early hour, announcing that Professor Snuggles had learned a new trick, and they absolutely had to see it right now, Clara would greet the chaos with laughter instead of frustration. Because this beautiful, complicated, wonderfully imperfect life was exactly what she'd been searching for all along. She just hadn't known it until someone had been brave enough to cross a line that should never be crossed, and patient enough to wait while she learned that the best things in life exist on the other side of the boundaries we build to protect ourselves. Love hadn't erased the pain of loss, or the pressure of ambition, or the complications of merging lives. It had simply grown beyond them, proving that hearts broken by tragedy could heal in unexpected ways, that success looked different for everyone, and that the most important lines to cross were the ones we drew for ourselves.